Welcome everyone to another episode of the Gin and Tonic Show. I'm your host, Almighty Atheismo. Joining me today is Klingschor, Stopspamming, Ali, and our special guest, Richard Godbehere, who is our what do you call it in baseball? The ringer, pinch hitter for our subject today, which will be the Crusades. If anyone wants to join the show, we're going to spend a short time on the dissertation Klingschor and Richard have prepared on the Crusades. Callers, of course, can talk about whatever they want. If you'd like to make an appearance on the show, to add a question or comment of your own, just send a Skype contact request or message to The Gin and Tonic Show on Skype. All callers are advised that we are broadcasting live over Blog TV and recording for later upload on YouTube. Please, if you come on, mute, minimize, or shut off your Blog TV so you don't hear everything on an echo. And yeah, that's it. So, once upon a time, the Byzantine emperor was on his back foot and sent a letter for help to the Latin Pope, and the rest is history, right? So tell us a little bit about how it started, and we'll take it off to Klingschor. Oh, one sec. I'm sorry. Small technical difficulties. All right. Well, I guess, Richard, it's time for you to steal Klingschor's thunder. Okay. Now, from what I've heard is that a previous Pope, Innocent, one of the Innocents, I forget it was Innocent that originally had a plan for this, but that it was later Urban who monopolized on the plight of the Byzantine emperor. Is that accurate?
It was Gregory. Big pain in the backside, investiture crisis, stop priests getting married, stop them from keeping their money of their wives. Pope Gregory who had the idea. It's quite a what's the word for it? There was a man of ideas, has to be said. But it didn't really go anywhere, mainly because he was too busy fighting Henry II of the Holy Roman Empire over his idea to stop priests getting money and yet have the Pope be the only person that had the power to make an emperor an emperor. So Urban II decided to take the job on in 1095, and he basically, why he did it? Now, here's a good question. We could do a whole show on that. Partly this investiture crisis, his problem was still rumbling on, and there were lots of very burly men hacking people apart in Europe. There was an attempt to stop them called the Peace of God, which didn't work. And so he needed, on one level, to direct their violence towards something. He gets this letter. He thinks, that's interesting. Maybe I can use that. And at the same time, he's trying to legitimize himself as Pope because there are anti-popes and other popes and rumblings and horses wanting to become Pope and whatnot. And so he sends them, he preaches this quite hate-filled sermon. I knew the word had come to me, sermon, and he starts things in action. He then people can take the cross, which is basically swearing that they will go to Jerusalem, and it's sort of an armed pilgrimage more than it is an attack. He says, take a pilgrimage and reclaim Jerusalem, and take the cross. You have a cross sewn onto you. You go off to Jerusalem. You fight. You win back Jerusalem, and as a result, if you die on the way there, you don't bother with purgatory. You go straight through. If you die after you get there, then you spend less time in purgatory because you've made this wonderful pilgrimage. You have to understand people were very otherworldly at the time, and that was very, very important. When you're a big burly lord who spends most of his time hacking peasants to pieces, you do worry about what's going to happen to you after you die, because that's somewhat a sin. So it was a way of reducing that as well. That's how, in a very simple terms, the First Crusade started. I'll stop there.
Okay. Let me ask you a few basic questions. Now, as for the, I mean, it's a good thing we have you and Kling here, because my opening statement, I think I completely butchered the order of popes. Innocent came later. He was third. Who was Innocent the second? He was involved with one of the Crusades, wasn't he? Because I remember reading it and saying just how deliciously ironic that a man whose name was Innocent would be responsible for the things he was ultimately responsible for. Which one was he?
Well, Innocent's very important. Innocent was around at the time of the Third and the Fourth Crusade. Innocent the Third is the first person who called them Crusaders.
Oh, okay.
Some people have argued that means the first thing were just holy wars, and they weren't crusades until Innocent came along and said, "You are going on crusade." It's arguably it's semantics. Because they did the same things. But then other people argue that there were people taking the cross and going on armed pilgrimages before 1096 as well, so why aren't they crusades, and so on. But Innocent was the guy who called them Crusaders, so he's a very, very important pope in the Crusades history.
So what if the original planned Crusades by Gregory and the like never materialized? What evidence do historians use to are there sufficient letters and things that they know that there was a plan behind closed doors to launch this? How do we know that they were planning them? Go ahead.
There were a series of letters that went backwards and forwards at the time to the Byzantine emperor, to some of the other kings, saying, "Hey lads, I've had an idea," and it just nothing came of it. Why nothing came of it? We don't really have enough information. Like I say, I suspect he had too much going on at home. You know, the investiture crisis, like I say, was basically Gregory wanted to stop money and wealth leaving the church through marriage. So he was trying to kind of separate church and state and say that the church has to be on otherworldly terms and can't get married, and that was the excuse he gave. At the same time, he wanted the church to have more power than the kings. He wanted them to have the power to grant divorces, to actually anoint new emperors and new kings. And so it eventually came to blows, and I'm convinced that he was just too busy, trying to not get killed by Henry II to do it at the time.
Did Henry II ever go as far as to elect an anti-pope? Because I know Barbarossa did.
Sorry?
Did Henry II ever have his own pope? Because there are certain periods of history where the French or Germans had their own anti-pope. Do you remember if Henry II?
Oh no, not really. Not really, not that I know. It's a little bit before where I get interested in it. I'll look it up in a moment, but I don't think he did. I think it was just a bit of a spat that went on that ended with them agreeing that the Pope would have no real power, but would be able to anoint him in a ceremony, and that's about it.
I remember when we had Tom Holland when we had Tom Holland on here, he and I butted heads a bit about whether in late antiquity or the Middle Ages were there people who were was everyone devout, or were there some people who just saw religion as a means to an end? And later on, I forget which crusade it is, Frederick Barbarossa, shortly before he joins in the crusade, he actually he breaks with the church to the point where he has an anti-pope, and the pope and the anti-pope each excommunicate each other, and then they're fighting. At some point he changes his mind, and then he joins the crusade. Now, I'm sorry, that guy was taking the piss in terms of his any religious. I mean, he was clearly an opportunist. So I think, whenever I read about this history, there's just, to me, such clear cynicism that bleeds through on the behalf of state and church leaders, and ultimately on both sides of the conflict.
Oh well, yeah, it's all politics. I mean, really, it's all politics. It's not.
If it's all politics, I've got a question. How did they agree on the financing of all this?
The financing of all this? Well, there's an interesting story about the financing of the Crusades, in that if you couldn't go on the Crusades, but you gave them a whole bunch of cash to help other people go on the Crusades.
There you go.
They give you a letter. Now, this is very interesting, because they gave you a letter, and that letter meant you got time off in purgatory. Now, this thing became the indulgence letters, which eventually bit him on the ass when Luther pinned the thing to the Wittenberg Church saying these indulgence letters have got to stop. So that's where that started in the Crusades. So ultimately, the Crusades are the reason the Reformation happened. Isn't
so
history interesting?
Everything fits in like that. I understand now. Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's really. I'm sorry, but Stop's question just cut right to the quick of it. You know what I mean? As far as how the money flows through these institutions. You know what I mean? That's the other shoe dropping. Is by the way, you know, you can bribe me and you don't have to. You can bribe God and you don't have to fight. You can always give a little bit of money to that great Nigerian prince in the sky. You know, he has this eternal reward, but he can't get to it right now. If you give him just a little bit of money ahead of time, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
Just amazing coincidence. I just won the Canadian National Lottery, which is funny because I'm not Canadian and I didn't enter. But I got a thing in my email. It says I won this vast fortune. All I have to do is send them a little bit of money. I mean, it's so I don't have to do this show anymore, guys. This may be the last episode with me as host. I'm set for life. I mean, it's so funny. It's the same thing. I mean, I'm sorry. I know this is supposed to be more history and not just kind of the knee jerk. Hitch slap to religions, but I mean, how can you not? I mean, I think even people, I think even like a lot of Protestants, for example, would use this as one of those classic Catholic shaming moments. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, well, this is why like you said, this is why we started the Reformation. It's because such obvious opportunism. You know? Yeah,
I mean, it was. It was. They could say that. They could say, listen, this thing that you did in the Crusades, the financial side is one of the reasons why we don't like you very much, because we'd never do that. The Protestants would never do anything of that sort. Neither would any other religion. That's only the Catholics, according to everyone but the Catholics. Hey, someone's disappeared. So I was about to ask Kling if he could do his thing, and he's gone now.
Yeah, I think we completely. Let me get you back on track. Now, the Byzantine emperor, who was he at the time during the crusade that actually was launched? Not was it the same emperor that had tried to spark the previous unsuccessful attempts?
You're breaking up a little bit. My end. I think it's my end.
Yeah, and I think there's a bit of a delay as well. I'll just speak louder. That's my solution to most problems. The Byzantine emperor.
I'm going to try something.
Okay.
Hang on a second. I'm trying something a little out of the ordinary, so people can actually see me. Not that they want to, but let's see.
Is that what you call fishing?
Oh, there I am. Finally.
Okay, while we're waiting,
anyway,
who actually went on these crusades? Not the people that actually pay, but who were the people that actually went and went off to die?
But perhaps it's actually a better way to start is to look at the context of the Crusades and what was happening immediately prior to their happening, really.
Are you going to give us a rundown? Who did what, when, how?
Well, I guess the problem is, as Richard has said, the problem is where do you begin with the Crusades? But most people associate Crusade with the Levantine armed pilgrimages. So really, I'll look at them in particular when I give this background. Let's see. Okay, so basically, now what was the date for the first Levantine Crusade? Was it 1096? Is that right?
Close
1096 is when it kicked off. 1095, Urban started the preaching. 1096, he actually set off. Although there was a failed at the end of 1095, there was the so-called Peasants' Crusade where they all got roundly slaughtered before they got anywhere. It wasn't really a Peasants' Crusade. It was just people who weren't. It was very rich people who weren't lords. It wasn't sort of your average farmer.
In any case, this occurred. So this is all in the late 11th century. So in the 11th century, Western Europe was basically experiencing a lot of expansion. The population was growing. All the forests were being cleared and drained. Marshlands were being drained. Now this is post Dark Ages. So Europe's coming out of the Dark Ages and moving to basically. Urbanization is now reoccurring. All the urbanization that collapsed and is now being rebuilt again in Europe. And so there's a big growth in towns. The majority of the denizens of Western Europe are serfs and peasants who live in a feudal system. But there is growing trade and industry, particularly in the Italian peninsula, where basically Genoa, Pisa. Basically, up until this point, they're Muslim, Arab Muslim, Berber Muslim pirates were constantly raiding and attacking the European coasts. But by the 11th century, the Italian city-states are driving them back further and further, and are beginning to eradicate this threat of Berber Arab Muslim pirates in the Mediterranean. Oh, and also Arab Muslim forces were also being driven out of Sicily by Norman expeditions from northern France. And the Normans had also conquered England and established an independent kingdom. France was under France proper. The parts of France that were not under Norman occupation were under the Capetian dynasty. And Germany was the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither holy, not controlling Rome, nor Roman, being German, nor Empire, being a confederation. And further east, the Magyars had coalesced into Hungary and converted to Latin Christianity, whilst the Byzantine Romans had annexed the Bulgarians and had reasserted their supremacy over the Balkan Peninsula. Let's see, what else?
Spain?
Spain was largely under Muslim dominion, but
now,
the
I thought at the outset, I thought at the time of the First Crusade, Spain was cut clean in half between the Almoravids and the European Spanish kings. Is that?
Sorry, I have a crappy map here, so I can actually check though, because I have a series of maps from Brill, from there, and they're really good. Let's see.
Brill and Silverpine? No, never mind.
No, the Brill, the 500-year-old Dutch publishing company.
Oh.
Okay. Let's see. What was the 11? Yeah, you're right. Atheismo. It's the let's see. The Murabitun control southern Spain.
Now, it's funny. You rarely I guess in the school course review of the Crusades, it always focuses on the eastward marches, and the Reconquista rarely is usually just a footnote. Was the Pope and his allies really ever interested in reclaiming the Iberian Peninsula? I mean, or was it the Spanish had to fight all the wars themselves? Did the Spanish get really any auxiliaries from the Central Europeans?
Yeah, I mean, they were Crusades. They were given the cross and called a crusade later on. So there were the Spanish Crusades. I think that's something Klings knows more about than me, because I'm interested in the Jerusalem Crusades, and I was interested in the non-Jerusalem Crusades, which were basically things like the Albigensian Crusades, which were frankly one bunch of Christians saying, you're a type of Christian we don't like, so we're going to call it a crusade and then kill you all. That happened quite a bit as well.
Yeah, so it's kind of the Iberian War. It's kind of like this forgotten crusade. I mean, it's not a secret, but like I said, like you just said, everybody wants to focus on the big clash of civilizations, east to west. Really quick, who was the Byzantine emperor? I asked this before. Who was the Byzantine emperor at the time, and how desperate is his situation in his ongoing struggle with the Turks?
Let me look up the emperor, because I've got a name in my head, but I've got this horrible feeling I'm wrong, because you know when you know something but you don't know you know it. So let me just double check this. No, the death of Alexius the First.
Oh, yeah, someone in the chat already got it.
Yep. Well done. Nice.
Yeah. I'll give, as prize money, I'll give a portion of my winnings to the chatter from my Canadian lottery winnings. Anyway, so Alexius the which?
The First. The first, according to my idiot guy, my notes I've got here. So yes, Alexius the First. So, he's the guy, I believe, who also sent the supposed letters saying, "Can we have a bit of help, because these guys are frankly becoming a pain in the arse."
Actually, I guess.
Oh my god! I keep having things appear on my.
I guess it's also worth mentioning the context of the Levant, Because what I just gave was what was going on in Europe immediately
that is
prior to
really
the Levantine Crusades. So here, this is what was going on in the Near East, in Anatolia, the Levant, so Syria, Jordan, Egypt, around that area. So unlike Western Europe, which was experiencing growth and expansion militarily, economically, commercially, etc., the Near East was in a state of anarchy and decline. So already, but just before the Crusades, the Near East was already like a massive war zone. By the late 11th century, which is when the Crusades began, the Levant was a vast war zone. That's a quote from a historian, torn between the Fatimids of Egypt, who were Arab, and the crumbling remnants of the Seljuk. So the Seljuki, the Turkish Sultanate that had controlled most of the Middle East in the centuries prior.
Hang on, you just lost me. Who did what?
Okay, so
you say first it was Spain, then it was Egypt,
Arabs.
and then it was Turkey, or which way around did it go?
Look, I can probably clear it up a little bit for you, Stop. Basically, and this is one of the great failings, I think, of the sort of crash course that Western students get when they study this area. First of all, they often say, okay, well, here's Christendom and here's the
Islam.
Ummah, Islamdom or whatever you want to call it.
No, they just say Islam.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Here's Islam on a map. You see, and here you thought
here's the United States, and here's Islam.
Then when you get up a little bit in the grade school, you say, okay, well, here's the complex. Here's the complex interrelation of the European states, and the Muslims were doing whatever. You know what I mean? It's still this like a giant green blob on the map that represents Islam, but they had just as many different breakaway dynasties, and they always had, as you had different major warring European powers. You had just dozens all along the African coast, Egypt. Usually, whoever controlled Egypt also controlled the Hijaz with the holy sites. You had usually a government in Baghdad, another one in central and eastern Persia. The Levant would have smaller kingdoms. Sometimes the Anatolian Peninsula, was doing whatever it was doing. For a while, it looked like the Turks were the only people who could really unify these different states once again after they had started to crumble as the Abbasids started to lose their grip. But then this particular wave of Turks, though they'd scored great successes against the Byzantines and reclaimed what is now modern Turkey so much that we think of it as a Turkish place, even though it used to be sort of a people of European ancestry and mostly Christians. Now, that had begun to slow in its momentum, I guess. So now, like I said, you have just as many warring, striving entities in the Middle East as you did in Europe. It's just that it's something that's
it wasn't
lost
slowing
over.
in momentum, because that's why the Crusades happened, is because the Turks were cutting into. But see, it was independent Turks, because the Seljuk central authority was collapsing, and all through Anatolia, Armenia, all the way down to Syria, all the way basically from Jerusalem to the Caucasus Mountains, there was a belt of all these fighting little Turkish states that were gnawing away at the Byzantines in Anatolia, particularly the Seljuks of Rum, who went on to eventually to become the Uthmanis or the Ottomans. So you've got, in Persia, you've got the Seljuk Empire, which is crumbling. In Egypt, sorry, let me say it again. In Persia, in Iran, you have a Turkish Empire, which is crumbling. In Egypt, you've got an Arab. In Iran, you've got a Sunni Turkish Empire that is crumbling. In Egypt and the Hijaz and a lot of Syria, you've got a Shiite Arab dynasty, which is also, beginning to fall apart at the seams. Then from Syria to the Caucasus and into a lot of Anatolia, you've got a cluster, just to use a technical term, a clusterfuck of Turkish Sunni kingdoms that are all vying for power. And the Sunni Turks and the Arab Shiite Arabs of Egypt and the Sunni Turks of the Levant are constantly at war.
When you say Shiite Arabs of Egypt, do you mean the Fatimi?
Yeah, that's right. But most people won't get that.
They're Ismailis.
Yes.
Which is not exactly.
Shia. They're not Ithna Ashariya Shia.
Yeah.
They're Ismaili Shia, which is an important distinction to make.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Okay,
They're not
so
like
now it
they're
makes
not
a
like
lot more
modern Shiites
sense.
of Iran.
So this is
Yeah.
this is
Yeah,
the
'cause when you say
context. So
Shia,
who
that's
is the first one to go in?
What do you mean?
Go
The
in.
first who? The first Europeans to
The
go
first European to go on a crusade into the Near East, where Richard is saying where they ended up in Jerusalem. What was the first goal
one.
Jerusalem, or was the first goal something completely different? That it was just a supportive connection of the Byzantine Empire into Turkey, and they just ended up in Jerusalem by mistake.
Well, it was led by was it led by Raymond the Fourth of Toulouse? Is that right? Is that the dude who was leading the first crusade?
It depends who you're reading. If you read Guibert de Nogent, it's most certainly Bohemond who is leading it, and so on. Because Bohemond is a good Norman, and of course the Normans are the people who won the crusade. Everyone else was tagging along. According to the Normans. No, but they were the first people. It was the 1096 invasion of Jerusalem, and the goal was Jerusalem. But the thing is, to simplify, in the decade leading up to 1096 and 11, when they actually gained Jerusalem, you had one leader, I think it was Malik Sar of the Seljuks, died, and his son was weak, and there was a massive fight over that part of the empire. The Caliphate. Yeah, the Egypt had crumbled because again there'd been a death. Al-Munstastir, I can't pronounce names as well as you can, I'm sure. And they there was one non-entity after the other trying to rule Egypt, and then they got quite a strong guy. And then 1 year before, and this is important to remember, 1 year before the Crusaders conquered Jerusalem, the Egyptians conquered Jerusalem. Which kind of makes the point that when people think they were fighting a single mass of Islam, which is the sort of the throwaway argument, they weren't. They were fighting people who were fighting amongst themselves, which is why when you get to Saladin, who because of his mentor Nur al-Din and Zengi before him, it's much harder because then they are fighting a more united front.
It's funny. You have these two major factions, all of which are fighting each other, and then while the Latin popes and Latin kings are sort of trampling on their Orthodox brethren in order to reclaim Jerusalem from the evil, this evil other. Meanwhile, the Orthodox Sunnis have to be shitting themselves in like fashion that such a highly Orthodox Ismaili Shia sect has Egypt and Jerusalem and Mecca and Medina. So they're it's like this fumbled football where everyone is trying to tackle the same city. But I mean, you'd think that Mecca and Medina would have a higher priority, and I'm sure that must have played a major role in Saladin.
Economically,
empires were run out of Egypt at the time.
What's that?
The empires were run out of Egypt at the time.
Yeah. I mean,
not out of Hijaz was just not. It wasn't really that important.
The
Right,
Hijaz
but
was
I wonder. But I wonder,
there was no time in Muslim or Arab history where the Hijaz was strategically or economically important. It has always been a crappy little backwater, completely insignificant.
But one that's good for propaganda purposes. That's the way
literally
Jerusalem was of
value.
no.
But on the ground, the reality is Iraq and Baghdad and Egypt were much more
that's
than anything in the Arabian Peninsula.
Right. But don't you think that much of what Saladin and his allies, their propaganda, framed it as, we gotta, in addition to fighting against the Crusaders, we have to reclaim the holy sites, because it just always seems to sell well. I mean,
Yeah.
Look today. People are.
Well, it's like Pokemon, you got to catch them all.
No, it's not.
Really.
No, it's
But
not.
you also need to think that the Crusades didn't really care enough to go into the Hijaz, did they? From what I understand, is they didn't really care about that. They didn't come there.
Yeah,
I don't think
there was an attempt.
forces have.
One crusading force did attempt to sail down the Red Sea and sack Mecca. I can't remember who it was, but they were like, let's go and really piss off the Muslims. Let's go sack Mecca. And I kind of wish they had succeeded, just because it would be so.
The current Kaaba is actually a modern fabrication, anyways.
Kaaba has been destroyed many times, but always by Muslims. No non-Muslims have ever destroyed it.
Well, they would. I'm sure that the Orthodox would dispute that because they would say that the faction that destroyed it were not the real deal.
Did it. Over the last 300 years, the Saudis have done it once or twice.
I'm just saying that you always have to watch out for the whole no true Scotsman fallacy thing. You know, they'll say,
the kind of person who would say that is.
I would say they have to watch out for that, not us.
but what I was saying about Pokemon, right, is that
no, I don't even.
You get to make silly analogies.
See,
I will make silly analogies.
I was trying.
No.
There's no Pokemon joke that'll work. There's no Pokemon joke.
Yeah, there is, because there are three legends. There are always three legendaries.
See, I was kicking myself because when you said Raymond and Bohemond, I was going to make an Everybody Loves Raymond joke, but I sat on that joke in the interest of good taste, as I asked you to sit on this Pokemon joke as well in the interest of good taste.
Who are you to dictate
with
me
grown-ups about history?
No. Oh yes. No.
This is very quickly devolved.
Somebody have a whistle or something?
Stay yourself, Atheismo. So basically, like it's the three like cities that are prized: Jerusalem, Mecca, and Medina. So, which is my point. Which was the Pokemon analogy. It says that the three legendaries. Ha ha ha. You know, the value is. I was actually reaffirming your point, Atheismo. Is that it is for propaganda purposes. You know, it is a massive. You know, Saladin had all three of them. You know, it would have been a huge boon to his prestige to have all three of the holy cities of Sunni Islam.
So,
what's my point?
Saladin, he's originally from northern Iraq.
He's a Kurd.
Okay, I assume he spoke Arabic in addition to Kurdish as well. I mean, was he perceived as much of an outsider because he was from there?
I don't think so. He was the Grand Vizier.
Saladin's an interesting story.
Of the Fatimids.
He was. Well, Saladin.
Egypt.
Yeah, Saladin was originally sent as a lieutenant to Circa. Circa, who was sent in into Egypt because the vizier at the time had been usurped and wanted his power back. But when he gave him his power back, Circa then demanded tribute and didn't get it, so he took over himself and then died promptly. So at that point, Saladin became the vizier of Egypt and sort of heir apparent to Nur al-Din, who was the guy who really, for a long time on the Arabic side, from the sources we've got. And by the way, if anyone out there is a historian who does English and Arabic and wants to do a project where they'll get funding, definitely say you're going to go and find all the Arabic sources and translate them into English, because no one's really done it. There's a book of the Arabic sources that's translated from Italian into English by an Italian who translated them, but that's about it. So yeah, if you want a career in history, start there. But anyway, where was it? Nur al-Din is a respected one amongst these sources. They like Saladin, and there's a guy bigs him up because basically it was part of his household. But Nur al-Din's the hero. He's the guy who drove back the Crusaders more than anything else. Saladin got Jerusalem. You know, Nur al-Din also unified the country. Zengi really is the guy who unified the country, but they hated him and he was murdered by one of his servants.
He used to drink, didn't he?
But now, hang on. So
he drank a lot.
So Zengi was the first person to lead this, what essentially was a coup against the Fatimids, or did he have a power base somewhere else?
He was in the Levant.
But he was in the Levant. Okay, yeah. Okay, but who's are the Fatimids in charge of this portion of Levant where he is?
They used to be, not anymore though. When he's in control, like even if they're, I can't remember if they were like officially in control, but he was the power there.
Okay, so then Zangi, then Nur al-Din fights against the Crusaders. Saladin takes over for Nur al-Din, and then Saladin finishes things, ties up loose ends with the Fatimids. Do I have the order of events right?
I think so.
I mean, you have the Ayyubid dynasty starting with Saladin. He was the first, really. So, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, to the point I was making is that Saladin too, when we're talking about how important Jerusalem was, this is where I was coming from. Saladin taking Jerusalem wasn't as important as Nur al-Din starting the fight. Well, Zenghis started the fight back. Nur al-Din really consolidated the fight back against the Crusaders and the other pain in the backside groups around. Which is, he was the hero. He was the pin-up boy. If people in the 13th century had a historical poster on their bedroom walls in the Levant, it would have been Nur al-Din, not Saladin.
Was it actually in Western culture? Wasn't it in European culture that Saladin actually really acquired his reputation as the great chivalrous knight? And he was kind of largely forgotten.
He got this legendary... Yeah, Saladin got a legendary status in Europe, partly through much later things like inclusion in poetry by... is it Paradise Lost, where he's in the noble savages, noble heathens, ring of hell, where basically you didn't believe in Christian God, but you're a nice guy, so you live in this area it's all right, but it's not heaven.
He was the Queequeg of Islam. Here's a question. First, Ali. This brings up an interesting point because Saladin, like, if you read any Western book on military history, they always the only bone that's ever thrown to people in the Middle East, Arabs, Muslims, or anyone from North. Like, you have to go back as far as Hannibal to get someone from North Africa who gets mentioned. Then Saladin is like the token person from that region who gets mentioned. But I'm sure that amongst Middle Easterners, there's a very different roster of who rates the highest. So, I mean, where does Saladin rate in? And feel free to mention a lot of people that we've never heard of before.
Well, I can't because the history, in at least as far as my knowledge goes, is not very deep. Even in school, we didn't really get that much into the area. That when they kind of mention these things in bunches, and usually in the area of the Crusades, the person who gets mentioned is also Saladin. Now that may actually be because of Western influence on modern history, and the way it's taught even in Arabic countries. But for the most part, the history that, at least in Egypt, most Egyptians are familiar with is modern history. That's really where a lot of where things are taught in detail. But as far as my own background is concerned, the person who was always up front was Saladin. He was the guy who conquered the Salibiyin, which are the Crusades, and he was the guy who was very merciful, and he was this great general, and he had he fought all these battles. There's a lot of dramatization of the way of his life, and they even say, there's a little quote from his deathbed that almost every young boy is told when he was on his deathbed, and he's got sword stabs everywhere in his body, and he says, "I wish I would have died in Jihad, but instead I die here on my bed, I think like a goat," or something like that. And so, if for the most part, what I got anyways was pretty much the same thing that people in the West get: is Saladin, great general, the guy who beat the Crusades, so on and so forth. Now, if you go and what I did was before the show started, I actually went and I read a few articles in Arabic written on that area of time, starting from when Nur ad-Din sends Asad ad-Din and Salahuddin to Egypt to help against some of the other people there fighting, and basically shortly after they actually win, and they help the Sultan al-Adid, the Fatimi, beat back the dissenters, or the people who are fighting over which is apparently just two emirs from the same area fighting over a place in the government, basically, or to be the head of a specific area in the government. And the Asad-ud-Din dies shortly after, and so Saladin is given the place where that they were originally fighting about. And so it pretty much falls in line with everything that you guys have said. But as far as I actually knew from my own background, Saladin was really the only name that we knew from that time. Nobody else was ever really mentioned in any detail.
Now, stop. You spent many years in living in Tehran. Are you there?
Yeah.
Do the Crusades have any place in the psyche of Iranians or Shia in general, from your experience?
Yeah, of course, because it was always the wrongdoing. That all they wanted was to liberate everybody, and then these guys came around and just went and this was just a pilferage crusade for them.
So the Iranians, who had absolutely nothing to do with the Crusades, maintain in their psyche a hatred of the Crusades.
Yeah, because they were plundered. Yeah.
That would be like me.
It's interesting that.
Like the American Civil War or something, like something completely.
No, you need to understand the psyche. You need to understand that anything can be bent in your mind to make sense. Right. So what they do is, for example, I don't even know if I'm ever going to make a video about this, to get the facts across that if you are a German in Iran, for example, you are a hero. If you're an American, you're an idiot, because the Iranians were in bed with the Nazis like 70 years ago, and even today you get the same sentiment that if you are a German, you are better than an American. So what they have managed to do is, in their own view, in their own perception, to make it better than what it actually was. Now, the same thing is true if you look at the Crusades, if you look at any kind of invasion. They will always go and they will blame the outsiders who are coming in and who are now killing Muslims, who are plundering, pilfering. It's always the other people's fault. And they manage
so
to do that.
This is more a symptom of like anti-Western reactionism, post-colonialism.
Not always. Like
but in this case,
they tried to exterminate the Jews.
Yeah, which is
so it's selective.
But it's kind of like it's not like the Iranians have a deep historical tradition of despising the Crusades. It seems like it's more just in the last century, following the sort of the tide of European colonialism.
That I can't answer.
Muslims,
I wasn't the last century. I just know what happens now.
Yeah, and Muslims have adopted the Crusades as like an archetypal European colonialism.
Yeah, you could call it that.
And they throw it around as like a flashcard, like Osama bin Laden saying, "Oh, Zionist Crusaders,"
invasion,
American Crusaders, that kind of rhetoric.
Right.
I was going to say myself that it's interesting, because one of the reasons why I was saying that nobody's actually done a good translation of the Arabic sources is because whereas in the West you have all the Crusades pretty much have people writing about them. So you've got Guibaud de Nogent and Foucault of Chartres and Villehardin and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on.
Looks like maybe
did you pause or did we lose your audio?
Oh, can you hear us, Richard?
I think maybe we lost him.
Oh, okay.
Let me.
I agree with him what he's saying, that there are very few Arabic, Persian, or whatever sources that describe the Crusades from the view of the Muslims. I just know the indoctrination that is given by the mullahs. That's all I know, but I don't know on what it is based.
Well, amongst Iranian academics and just the street level, does anybody care
about the Crusades?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's popularly cited by, in this case, Muslims in general, as evil Christian Western imperialism, the archetypal Christian Western imperialism. So people do care about it.
By the way, as far as the Sunnis are concerned, there is a Sunni Shia side to the pre-Crusades part of the story, and Saladin is actually seen as a hero for conquering the Fatimids, or not conquering the Fatimids, because really it was kind of a quiet coup.
Well, the Fatimi was like a 14-year-old sick kid.
Okay.
That was the king who Saladin.
No, this is
power.
Adad.
I can't remember his name, but he was like a 14-year-old sickly kid, and I don't know if he just died and Saladin just like.
Well,
succession,
it seems like, from what I understand, is he basically, after he took over the position after helping the Fatimi guy getting rid of the other militants, he then isolated or fired basically the Shia judges, and he installed in their place Sunni, because obviously Sunni is not really a monolith in that way, but Sunni judges, or judges that were more in line with Nuruddin and his cohort, and then started schools to teach the Sunni mazhab,
basically
which
he
after
tried
a few
to reverse the Shia.
That's right, and he was and this is maybe propaganda, and it's said to be that he was so successful that within 3 years the entirety of Egypt had gone back to being a Sunni country, all on its own, without any. Yeah, right, and that's why
the Shiites. Al-Azhar University. Al-Azhar University was kind of created by it was created by the Fatimids, but as it was a center of dawah. That's what its function was. It was a center for Shiite propaganda. And the Shiites all these Shiite missionaries would actually go down into the Sahel, into the Sudan, to preach and spread Shia Islam. That was what the function of Al-Azhar University was. It was for the promulgation and
is the end result of this
of Shias.
Is the end result of this that Saladin is in the same?
Apparently Egypt.
Hold on a second. Is the end result of this that Saladin ends up in the same category as Umar? And certain other companions, in that he's beloved by one side and hated by another?
Well, I don't know if he's hated by the Shiites. I just talk about it from a Sunni perspective, and he's seen as a hero for defeating the Shiites as much as he is seen a hero for defeating the Crusaders. So it's and also, and this is actually a little bit of irony. Today, his own little Sufi leanings, if you will, are now kind of looked upon as not completely Sunni, and so they usually always try to play down that part of his own leanings. So, but as far as the Shiites hating him for doing that, I'm not sure. I can't really say. I can't speak much to that, but
although apparently Egypt, rural Egyptian Islam is actually quite syncretic. Am I using that?
Yeah.
It's
using that correctly.
It's like a mixture of Shia and Sunni. In their beliefs and practices.
There is a big Shia following in Egypt. There is also a lot of festivities and things based on Ali and Hassan and Hussein. My name is obviously Ali, but even people who are not named Ali are always told very grandiose stories about Ali and his sons and all their things. So Egypt does have a Shiite streak in their present, and certainly in their history as well.
But they won't. What's the observance of the martyrdom of Hussein?
There are actually, like I said, there are sections, there are areas for where mosques are of Hassan and Hussein, where people are actually always camped out there. That's like a big thing. You go and visit the mosques and you pay your respects to the imams and things like that. So, and there are festivities on those days. There are festivities on a lot of days that have to do with Shiite stuff. So it's actually kind of funny. It's actually funny because the Salafis and the fundamentalists, they don't like this very much, but the Egyptians have a lot of made up holidays that don't exactly fall in line with the fundamentalists, that have to do with Muhammad's birth, that have to do again with Ali and Hassan and Hussein, and the Salafis hate this, and they try to outlaw it religiously all the time. Obviously, not very many people listen, just because people are really looking for any reason to go out and have a good time, and so. Well, I mean, mainly that's what it is, and the more of these days you have, the better, as far as most people are concerned. So, there is a lot of tendencies, and going back to Kling's point, of Egyptians being, I don't know, I don't want to use the word that he used since I don't know what it means, and so I would rather, there is a lot of things that are not kosher according to Salafis and fundamentalists in that way.
Stuff that the Peninsular Sunnis wouldn't tolerate.
Oh, certainly not. Yeah, definitely not.
Okay. Someone sent me a question for Richard, but of course this is for anyone who knows. Is there any truth to a story about prior to the capture of Jerusalem, Crusaders resorting to cannibalism in a particular community?
Yes. Well, cannibalism is not mentioned, but in all of the accounts they talk about them getting so hungry, not just before the capture of Jerusalem, but also the capture of Antioch and I believe Tyre as well, so hungry that they are drinking the blood of their horses and eating saddles. And it is, they don't explicitly say that they ate each other, but they do say they are so hungry that nothing was beyond them, is the best way to put it. So it's one of those things again where the old story put two historians in a room and you have three opinions come out of it. I would say that it's suggesting perhaps that happened, but the problem is that when people write it up, they're not going to say that, are they? But yeah, they certainly drank the blood of their horses. They couldn't kill their horses because that was too important to them. So they would drink the blood of the horses, and they would eat the saddles. There were plenty of corpses lying around.
Apparently,
a fresh steak.
Well, based on the question I got, apparently there's a version of the story that says they said, "Well, our horses are too valuable, but the natives aren't," and that's culminated in some opportunistic cannibalism. Like you said. If these guys remembered to bring their plate armor but forgot food, then it could devolve in a desperate situation. But maybe it could have happened. But I wonder if any real evidence of it survives.
There was one question which Richard started, which I think is very interesting, and that is the sources, the Arabic sources. Are there any Arabic sources for the Crusades?
Well, he said that they just weren't being translated into English.
This is.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, well, this is the interesting thing. There are. I've got a book. Like I say, I've got a book here, which is translated from Francesco Gabrielli's translation. This is the problem, and the thing is, and this is where it's interesting, where you get things like Guibert de Nogent, Foucault Chartres, all these people, William of Tyre, writing about the Crusades and writing about just the Crusades and nothing else. The Arabic sources, to find the Crusades, you have to go through somebody writing about Saladin's life and find the bit where it mentions the Crusades, and then read through a load more and then find another bit, because they didn't write about them specifically as being an event. They would write about them. And I've got Ibn al-Siyah, Bahauddin, Imad ad-Din, Usama. These are
Imad
people.
Imad ad-Din is El-Isfahani, right?
Imad ad-Din was secretary to Nur ad-Din and Saladin.
Yes, because he's my source for the mass rape of Jerusalem, which I'll mention later. Sorry,
yeah, he was. There's a couple of massacres. The massacre of Jerusalem.
Mass rape.
Wiped out any. Oh, the mass. Okay. Well, I was going to talk about the massacre as well, which is one of the few things in the Crusades that's actually confirmed, because both the Arabic sources and the Western sources talk about Saladin killing I think it's 3,000 people. So it's that is likely to have happened, because one of them says the glorious slaughter of 3,000 infidels, and the other says the appalling slaughter by these evil infidels of our wonderful Christian men. So, like I said,
okay, and then what happened later?
There's money to be made translating this stuff.
But then they bugger off again, right?
Sorry?
Then they left again.
Sorry?
The Crusaders?
The Crusaders.
They were kicked
They
out
went
by
back to France, to Britain, and blah, blah, blah. And then Jerusalem was taken again, right?
Do you mean the very last Crusade?
Is this like
No.
the Richard Lionheart stuff?
Oh,
or-
you mean yeah? They got kicked out, they came back, got kicked out, came back.
But the
on
Richard,
and
they
on.
never
That's
made
exactly
it to
what-
Jerusalem on the second try, did they?
But is that a fact or is that
No.
fiction? Is that a legend?
No,
What is
it
that?
was the Christian reconquest, and then reconquest, and then reconquest of Jerusalem.
Correct.
It's sort of, it's sort of, well, they conquered Jerusalem. They fortified Jerusalem. The Second Crusade was really a let's fortify it. The Third Crusade was let's conquer some more lands, which ended up in a total scrub, and Jerusalem, them getting kicked out, them losing the Battle of Hattin and losing Jerusalem. After that, it's odd, because firstly you get a bit of tit-for-tat retake of Jerusalem. They never really retook it after Hattin, but they did, for example, at one point, lease it. This is weird. A guy, one of the Fredericks, I think the fourth, who went on crusade, and the Pope hated him, excommunicated them the lot, got rid of him, went there and leased Jerusalem for 10 years. Just did a deal. This is how important Jerusalem was. And at the end of the 10 years, before that, the walls had been taken down anyway, because they were so sick and tired of these constant sieges, that they put it in a position where, look, if you want it, just walk the hell in, we're sick of this. And at this point, a deal was done. The Pope hit the roof that this guy who'd excommunicated got Jerusalem back without actually fighting. Just went, how much do you want? Well, there you go. There's whatever it is. So it's a very, very strange period in history, which is why there's so much conflict as to what went on.
Now,
there are times when... Go on.
I'm sorry, but yeah, I was just about to bring up this very chapter. So, one of the Crusaders made a deal with the new Ayyubid government, and they
I think they already made a deal with the Fatimids previously as well.
I'm not aware of that.
I think there was
but wait, I'm sorry. Let's
Roman
backtrack.
Fatimid.
Which party was responsible for the complete raising of the walls? Richard?
The raising of the walls, that was around the time of that was in between the Third and the Fourth Crusade. Let me have a look who exactly did that, because
the Christian occupants of the city destroyed their own walls. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I think it was, but it was done. There was somebody who ordered it, and I believe it was one of the Christ Almighty. Who is it?
So here's the thing: the Crusaders go to all this trouble to attack all these places, including Jerusalem, to take over the whole seaboard. Now they end up being given back control of the city by treaty. Does this suggest that Jerusalem was not as important on the Muslim side, and the Muslims just wanted the Crusaders to stop killing them?
I'd say so. Yeah, that's what I think. I think it wasn't as important. Like I say, it was. It was interesting. Jerusalem is very much a jewel that the Christians wanted. I actually think there's another thing as well that happened, which is important. That in the Battle of Hattin, the Horns of Hattin, which is when Saladin defeated the army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and then went on to take Jerusalem because they wanted to stop it. They had a relic with them of the true cross, which was going to assure them victory. Now, the first thing Saladin's army did was nick it and run off with it, and then defeat the army. And the Catholic Church never got this true cross back. And if you read letters to the Pope afterwards, they are more bothered about losing the true cross than Jerusalem. You know, it's this relic has gone, and it's if you ask a Catholic today, they don't even know there was a relic of the true cross. But it's a huge huge blow to lose something that they think is that important, because they really, really do think this is really, really the true cross, you know.
How big of a
and
chunk
they've lost it to these.
So the true cross, meaning the cross on which Christ was crucified, yes?
The cross that Christ was crucified on, they had a chunk of it in a box, as they did all the time.
How big of a chunk?
Take it out with them.
How big of a chunk, and did they claim to have other portions?
Well, it could be. It's not really described very well. I suspect it was a fair chunk because it was carried by 4 people, rather than some of the smaller things, you know, that were like the lance that one guy had over his shoulder and other things, bones that they just have on them. I've just been reminded of an episode of Blackadder, but I'll not go there. But yeah, so I don't think it wasn't the entire cross, obviously, but it was a bejeweled box, and I actually think that the Muslim army said, "Oh, look at that box covered in jewels. Let's have a bit of that," and didn't actually know that's what we're taking, you know.
Do you think they?
That's one of the interesting things.
Do you think they saw the useless hunk of wood in it, threw it away, and kept the box like a child when you buy them a gift? They don't play with the toy; they just like hide in the box and pretend it's a fortress. That's not a serious question, obviously.
Well, interesting.
No, sorry. Please go ahead.
Well, interesting is there were a lot in the discussions between Richard I and Saladin. There were many attempts at treaties, and the sticking point was always when Richard said, "Oh, the true cross back." Whenever he said that, Saladin would then climb up and go, "No. We can't do that. Oh, everything. We'll give you that bit of land, and we'll do that. All those other things you asked for, but we can't give you the true cross back." So yeah, you're probably right. They probably were going, "Oh crap, have we still got that?" No, we just threw it away. We thought it was a hunk of wood.
They should have just grabbed another random hunk of wood and just be like, "Here it is. Here's the true cross."
Right, because there's no way that any relatively Orthodox Sunni Muslim could find any religious significance in the cross, because according to the Muslim tradition, Jesus wasn't crucified. He was a prophet, but he wasn't the Son of God, not crucified. So it would be considered either a completely neutral, laughable superstition from their point, or a heretical object, which should be disposed of. But I can just imagine them sitting down at these high-stakes things like, "Also, we'd like the true cross back," and a little thought bubble appearing of Saladin's head, of him opening the box, tossing it over his shoulder into the sand, walking away, not ever looking back, and saying, we can't do it, we don't have it.
Yeah.
This
led to at one point.
So no, you go.
I was going to say at one point. I just made this last point. At one point, it was so critical, this cross, that when Saladin basically said yes to everything except the cross, Richard I went outside and killed 30,000 prisoners as a retaliation for not getting the cross back. It was pretty important to him. So yeah, I think Saladin's going, "Oh God, he's going to kill all those people and I can't do anything about it." Shit.
This is Richard the Lionheart. That's Richard the Lionheart?
Richard the... Yeah, Richard I, one of the biggest dicks in British regal history.
Well, but this is the guy. This is like the protagonist in a lot of popular productions, literature, movies about the Crusades, right? He's the good guy, right? He's the benevolent.
Yeah.
And he just throws a fit and kills 30,000 people.
When have the Crusades movies ever been accurate? But I'll get onto that later. Because now.
Wait. Are you saying that Kingdom of Heaven wasn't a documentary?
I'm going to get into that movie. I love that movie, but my goodness, it is a crock. But look, I just want to go back to cannibalism, because I actually studied the Crusades in an undergrad capacity last year, and I actually looked up and did some research on the cannibalism thing. And there are 2 sources that I know of, at least, which do mention cannibalism. Like for example, in the 1098 siege of Ma'arat el-Numan, I can't say this word, that city. Rudolph of Cain. Do you know who I'm trying to say? That how do you say his name properly? Rudolph of Cain.
I don't know.
Do you know who I'm talking about?
Rudolph.
He was a witness.
1098 we're talking about.
1098. He was a witness to the siege of Ma'ara and Numan. He said that in Ma'ara, our troops boiled pagan, also Muslim, adults in cooking pots. They impaled children on spits and devoured them grilled. And what's his name? Foucher of Chartres? How do you say that in French?
Fulcher Deschamps.
Fulcher. That dude,
Fulcher.
he was also a witness to the siege of Ma'arat and Man, so far as I'm aware, and he said that in Ma'arat and Man, our men suffered from excessive hunger. I shudder to say that many of our men, terribly tormented by the madness of starvation, cut pieces of flesh from the buttocks of Saracens, that's Arabs, lying there dead. These pieces they cooked and ate, savagely devouring the flesh while it was sufficiently roasted. Now, I don't know if that could just be like a story, like an anecdote that's not true, but that was recorded by... Yeah.
I think it was... I think there's more to the exchange. Some captured Arab guy, they're like, now, pagan, you will worship our Lord. He's like, well, you can bite my ass, and then that's just it escalated quickly.
It's also remembering that.
Yes, and
it's
the
also worth remembering the way they wrote.
You watch way too much Simpsons.
The way they
way too much. The Bart is coming through.
Well, okay. Can I ask another question to Richard? Because what we heard a lot at school is that the generals, the Muslim generals, invented totally new things that the Crusaders had never heard of in warfare, and this is why they were so incredibly successful when it came to taking Jerusalem. Is that a legend, or is any of this documented somewhere from the Crusader point of view?
What are them coming up with a totally new thing?
New tactics?
No, not really. I mean, they talk
new weapons.
Are you saying that according to the school, your Iranian school, that the Mamluks of the Muslim side had awesome, superior tactics that they developed, and thus were able to defeat the Crusaders and kick them out of Levant? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was not only strategy; it was also weapons. It was whatever kind.
The tactics thing. Is everybody still there?
Yes, we're still here.
We're frozen. Fantastic. It's just me freezing then. Yeah. I'm not really a military historian. I have a friend called Tim, who's the greatest military historian I ever know, and he likes the Crusades, who could probably walk you through every battle, every step of the way from both sides. But from what I gather, in the case of Saladin, you may be correct, because the West needed an excuse to not take back Jerusalem. Richard, the asshat, I mean the Lionheart, had a habit of getting so close. He kept beating Saladin. He kept defeating him in battle, and he'd get to a point and then wouldn't go for Jerusalem. He'd do something else, and this has puzzled historians ever since. Why on earth he didn't go that extra mile? So when they do talk of new tactics, they talk of the Horns of Hattin as being a new tactic. They talk of Saladin being a great tactician who beat the mighty Richard I, and it's excuses, really. It's it's not our fault. They cheated. Really.
Okay, so you're saying that the Crusaders said, well, they cheated, and the Muslims said, you see, they're not used to our tactics. We have superior weapons and everything.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, it's funny.
The one weapon they do mention
when you got two people, any two group of people, both with religious foundations for their cause, fighting each other. How does anybody explain how anything goes wrong? I mean, like we were saying before, it's like they had an artifact that they thought would guarantee them victory. It didn't, and yet they still thought it was important to get it back. I would have said, look, we must have taken the wrong box when we left Rome, because that thing didn't work for shit.
Exactly. This is what they're saying. What? God is not on our side.
Yeah, you'd think. It's like, okay, let's have one big battle, and whoever wins that, we'll just assume that that's the person God chose. But no, instead they have this divining rod in a box, this hunk of what's supposed to be the true cross. It doesn't work, and yet they still want it back, even though, I mean, did they really? I wonder. Did they really think it was, for all intents and purposes, this super weapon that malfunctioned the first time? But if they got it back, by hook or by crook, if they got it back, they would once again have the thing that made their army invincible, but didn't. And secondly, if it did work, wait a second. If it's only a piece and it really did that, then there's no excuse why they should have lost at Hattin, because at Hattin, Saladin lures the Crusaders away from their source of water, and then he uses a two-pronged attack to surround them. Well, what you do is you take the piece of the True Cross, you saw it in half, you give each of the halves to two different sections, and then you meet both flanks of the two-pronged attack, and then they're both equally invincible. You know?
Well,
and also bring drinking water next time.
Well, firstly, I'm guessing hacking the True Cross in half might have been frowned upon, but also, if you read the accounts of this particular battle and the lead up to it from the Western side, they are already giving the reason why they lost before they even lose. There's lots of sin and there are women, and women are always a problem, and there are lots of other things going off, and so of course they're not fighting the battle the way Christ wants them to, and as a result the cross is no good. It's just a hunk of wood because Christ isn't with them. It's, the accounts to I've actually got the letter here in this book that they sent to the Pope to go, oops, we lost the cross.
So wait, Jesus is with them the whole time. Then it's like, you guys lost the piece of wood. I can't do it anymore.
Well, or either that, or he was put off. He was put off by the presence of women. I don't know. I mean, he hung around with mostly guys when he was alive.
Yes, there is a gospel or something, supposedly something, hint, something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
actually, what's interesting though is that you were saying before how, like the theology of both sides. It's funny because Islamic theology was actually transformed and reinvented because of, well, mostly it was the Mongol invasions, but also the Crusades. Because previously, the Muslims took their massive expansion, even though it wasn't as quick as we think it was, but they took their massive expansion to be a proof that Islam is true.
Yeah.
And so when the Mongols came in and just slaughtered and steamrolled everyone all the way up to the Levant, and then the Crusaders came in conquering the Levant and pwning Egypt, and even in Spain as well. But I don't know if Spain was taken into account in this instance. Muslims had to actually completely rethink, like Ibn Taymiyyah was one of the catalysts for this, rethinking Islamic theology. And so, wait, well then, maybe God wasn't with us, so what's going on? And Ibn Taymiyyah blamed bid'ah, innovation, for the failures of the Muslim polity, of the Islamic Commonwealth. And he was like, yeah, it was paganism and Shiism and Sufism and the accretions of culture detracting away from the true Islam that made us lose all these battles. From what I remember, anyway, that's...
So he didn't blame math?
What?
Math? Math.
It was a terrible joke that obviously nobody got, so let's just...
The scholar in question didn't like negative number. There's some kind of math that he declared heretical, right?
Some magic or something like that?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Well, I wasn't sure if it was Ibn Taymiyyah, but I was asking if he was one of them. Right, but I was...
thought that mathematics was a bad thing, I think. I can't remember. It's been a while since I...
So you have Crusaders who think that they win when they have a log, and then Muslims who think that they lose when they have prayer beads. I mean, it's never ceases to amaze me how the role of trinkets and things like this. I mean, obviously there's other things that could fit under the category of innovation, but
superstition.
Yeah.
But I just want to I want to bring the subject to I guess what the most controversial and exciting aspect of the Crusades, which is misconceptions, because there are a number of politically, religiously driven narratives about the Crusades which are not quite true, and I think that they'd be quite fun to get into. Namely, for example, that the Crusades was simply an attempt to get booty and plunder is one. Another one is that the Crusades were a counter-jihad in response to the Arab Muslim expansions. Another one which makes me laugh is that jihad was invented as a response to the Crusades. It didn't exist before the Crusades. Another misconception is that it was Islam versus Christianity, and another good one is that it was good Muslims versus bad Christians. So, do you want to get into some of these fun narratives about the Crusades?
Yeah.
Well, let's start with the first one then. Booty and plunder. From what I'm aware, there was booty and plunder were offered sometimes as an incentive, but the reality was that crusading was really ruinous. Like it was a huge waste of money. Like it was really, really taxing. I think was it one of the French monarchs, like went bankrupt, or spent a couple of times his country's economy on the Crusades.
But did he? I wonder. Did he think it was it just a bad investment, or was it that he just didn't care about money in lieu of the whatever political or religious goals? You know what I mean? In other words, was it like a campaign where he just knew he'd have to expend a lot, or was it that he thought there would? Because I think that. You know, if you look at some of the propaganda people spread about, like Prester John, the mythical Eastern Christian king, and things like that, I wonder if they romanticized the Middle East so much that they thought it was this land of milk, honey, and treasure, and that they would get everything they invested back in tenfold. I wonder if that was the case. Richard, can you attest it if they thought there was that kind of personal gain involved, monetary?
It was Louis IV, by the way.
Yeah.
The Seventh Crusade in the mid-13th century cost Louis IV more than 6 times the annual revenue of the French crown. Sorry, go on, Richard.
Well, it cost Richard I more than that. I mean, Richard I ended up bleeding England dry because he got himself caught on the way home by one of his enemies and stuck in jail. So, you know, it cost him... It cost England, that country he was only spent about a month in his entire life, a lot of money for a long time. It's an interesting one because I was just trying to find one of my copies of one of the original urban speeches, and he does definitely mention, by the way, he sort of asides, by the way, when you get there, you can stay there, and some of you, well, we're going to need a bishop, and we're going to need a king, and we're going to need lords over there, you know, wink, wink. But that's the first crusade. By the time the third, fourth, fifth crusades come along, and all these people have been eating their horses and saddles, you'd think a few of them would go, hang on, you know, there's no money in this, surely. And it doesn't explain the servants who got sponsored to go. It doesn't explain any of that. So they weren't going to get booty and plunder.
So it's firmly established that there was no money in it for the kings, but what about the church?
Well, some of the kings
That's a good question.
Did get fiefdoms and whatever, but for most of the people participating, there was no substantial plunder or fortune to be made. But sorry, yeah, what about the church?
No, it's more... I mean, there was one of the things that happened because of the Gregorian reforms is that the priests weren't supposed to, in inverted commas, weren't supposed to fight, weren't supposed to be involved in battles. Now, of course, there were priests who went along and fought and were involved in battles. So, the question as to whether it was about money. Now, you think if they're going to attack Jerusalem and that they're going to do it on the excuse that they are helping their Orthodox brethren in the Byzantine Empire, that once they've got Jerusalem, they're thinking in the back of their mind, we've done it now, Byzantine, now cough up. But I don't think it's about booty and plunder, because booty and plunder isn't something that actually happened, and which doesn't mean it wasn't there, but it certainly wasn't the main goal. It was a secondary, tertiary goal at best for just a few of the people who were likely to get it, which tended to be the lords.
Well, but you mentioned before that there were widespread indulgences for people who didn't want to go fight. I wonder how much of that added up to at the end of the day. Seems like it would be a pretty hefty sum.
Yeah, quite a bit. But that's paying into the church, and honest gov, they used every penny of it to send people out to crusade. They did, yeah, you know.
Right.
So it's
The Crusades registered as a charity.
Yes, it was registered charity. There's actually a story in England when they're going around preaching the Crusades of all the men who don't stand forward and get the cross. There are women going around putting white feathers in their shirts, in their tunics, which is a sign of cowardice at the time. So there was no pressure either to sign up to the Crusades.
Yeah. Actually, what you said about charity, what's funny is that, was it Riley Smith who argued that the Crusades were actually seen by the Crusaders as like an expression of Christian love and charity?
Yeah, JRS, interesting fella.
Was it Riley Smith? Yeah, JRS, Jonathan Riley Smith. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, JRS does it. This is a great little book if you want to know about the Crusades. Partly because it's fabulously written, and partly because it's tiny. So anyway. The other one's huge, but he argued it was there's the belief that it was an act of charity. It was an act of going and you have to read the article. If any of you guys can get on JSTOR, put in crusading as an act of love into JSTOR, because it's the argument.
Probably find a PDF online.
Yeah, it's great, but he talks about how it was seen as a way of, these people, they need saving from themselves, really. And so we need to go out and we need to save them from themselves. And and just the mentality at the time. You see, that's the thing. It's hard getting into the mentality at the time. Like I said at the beginning, it's all about otherworldliness. It's all about what can I do in this world to assure my future progress and my everlasting soul, and going and killing people who weren't like you seemed to be one way of doing it. And it meant that you were helping them as well. They're helping them to God by slaughtering them in the tens of thousands. But yeah. And
well, I would say that in theory it was kind of seen as sort of Christian charity and love, but in practice, of course, it was, bloodshed and massive slaughter.
So what's the modern? If anyone knows this is straying a bit out of history proper. But does anyone know what the Catholic Church's official statement is on the Crusades?
I don't actually. That's a very good question.
I imagine they sort of shy away from the Crusades.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Well, my series of videos I'm doing at the moment, sideways plug here, that goes out, that I'm doing one a week, is basically based on a Christian group called the CIA, the Catholic Information Authority. I think it's terrible. Is it FBS or not? And they did a thing on the true Crusades, what they really happened. And so I'm taking it apart, and their scene is it's counter jihad. It's fighting back the terrible influx of Muslims that happened, that they had to turn around immediately and fight back 400 years later. So there is seemingly a Catholic. I mean, if one of you can get online, because my computer's really slow at the moment, maybe there's at the Vatican website a statement.
Yeah, okay. This isn't the Vatican website, but I was searching for it while you and Klingschor were discussing other things. Now, let me preface this by saying this is not the Vatican website. This person is not. Are you guys familiar with New Advent?
Yes.
How representative would you say they were before I begin to read this?
Just a second.
Do they operate under any official capacity oversight by the church itself, or are they just angry Catholics on the internet? Because like I said, you got to be. Anybody?
Let me have a. I'm looking up. Sorry.
Okay, well, I'll just assume. Let's just assume that these guys aren't directly affiliated, because I'm sure that the Catholic Church proper would at least try to be more diplomatic than these people are being. This article by these people at New Advent begin. The Crusades were expeditions undertaken in fulfillment of a solemn vow to deliver the holy places from Mohammedan tyranny. I'm guessing that these people are...
Are they 100 years old?
No, the New Advent is, it's a Catholic encyclopedia, is directly affiliated with the higher echelons of the Catholic Church and speaks for them. It's used by academics. It's used by academics as a citation source.
That was like what you'd expect from a creationist. That's like the most reactionary rhetoric I've ever heard.
Yeah.
From Mohammedan tyranny. See, the Mohammedans were they're tyrannizing themselves.
This is probably why the Pope quit.
Yeah, the modern church still says these people were.
Actually, let's use this to segue into the second misconception I have listed, which is that the Crusades were a counter-jihad.
Okay.
And by the way, ladies and gentlemen viewing, I've linked Richard's YouTube channel on the blog TV title thing. You'll see a link. So you can go and check his stuff out there. It's quite entertaining. I recommend it. Anyway, and informative too. So basically, it is basically the far right and Christian conservatives are very fond. Well, it's sort of like a staple of their rhetoric concerning Islam that the Crusades were actually a counter-jihad, and that they were simply a response to the Arab Muslim invasions. And look, it is true that all the way up to the Crusades, there were polities that happened to be Muslim, or even sometimes for religious reasons, like Jihad, Holy War expansion, who were expanding into Europe and attacking Europe. And, you had these, all the way up until the Crusades, you had Muslim pirates attacking the Italian and French coastal cities. You did have, these Muslim polities in Al-Andalus, in the Iberian Peninsula, who were battling against the people who were the Christian forces there. But, like, that's... To say that the Crusades were a response to the Grand Muslim Jihad expansion in general is kind of like saying that the First World War was Germany's revenge for the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
It's kind of stupid. I mean, sure. It is this power did this, and then many years later, there's sort of this kind of general polity responded or did that to them. But it wasn't the Germans weren't thinking, the reason why we're invading France is because of Napoleon. The Christians weren't really going, you know what, we should do a revenge for Muslim Jihad. That wasn't the reason why. The reason why was, ostensibly, was, let's go help the Byzantines because they need help, and let's retake the Holy Land for Christian piety. It wasn't like, let's roll back Islam from the world. I mean, like...
Yeah, which is why they stopped at Jerusalem. Yeah, because
why didn't they try and retake Iraq, which had also been a great Christian center? Why didn't they try and retake all of North Africa, which had been Christian? Because it wasn't a counter-jihad. And this is, I mean, it kind of annoys me because, these far rights and conservatives use this to try and make, the Crusades were justified. Well, no, it was at this point, it would be like Native Americans today, or Indigenous Australians today going, let's wage a massive war to kick out all the people who have occupied this land for a couple of hundred years. Okay, the only
statement by a pope in recent history was Jean Paul II. This is what I was able to find. That's all there is. Jean Paul II issued an apology for the behavior of the Crusaders in their attack on Constantinople.
Yeah, that's the Fourth Crusade. That's a fantastic Fourth Crusade. My favourite crusade, the Fourth Crusade, because it was a clusterfuck from start to finish. It was a beautiful, hilarious moment, as much as many people die and can be in crusading history. Do you want me to go through the Fourth Crusade very quickly? Because I love it.
Please.
Okay. Innocent III says, we need to go on crusade because we need to get Jerusalem back. They've lost it. Go on crusade. That Richard idiot, he's lost it. And now he's fighting the bloody French. He can't be bothered. So we need to go and get Jerusalem back. So he gets these people together, and I'm doing this as quickly as possible. So they go, and they say to the Venetians, right, we're going to attack them by sea this time. They'll not see that coming. We usually go by land. We'll go by sea. So can you build us a load of boats? And they go, fantastic. Yep, 35,000 marks. They build them the boats. They turn up at Venice, and they go, here's 12,000 marks. And the Venetians go, we said 35,000 marks. Where's the rest? And they go, oh, well, we don't have it. And so the Venetians say, well, there's this place called Zara, right? And they're out trading us at the moment around the Mediterranean. If you go and attack them, we'll call it quits, because then we won't have to pay to attack them. And that's cool. The Pope says, do not attack another Christian settlement under any circumstances. And the Fourth Crusaders go, sod it, we need to get there, and go and attack Zara. At which point Innocent III excommunicates the lot of them. They then go to up to the Byzantine Empire and say to him, right, we need some money. And the Byzantine Empire says, no. They say, no, we really need some money. And he says, no. At which point they say, sod ya, and they invade Constantinople and set up for a short period the Holy Kingdom of Constantinople. At which point Innocent III goes, ooh, that's worth a penny or two. I forgive you. I forgive you. Fantastic. They then just turn their attention to Jerusalem, sort of, because they're enjoying the money they've now got. Get to Jerusalem and completely fail to do a damn thing, and then go home with a head in their hands. And that's the Fourth Crusade in a nutshell. It's just a complete mess from start to finish. And Pope Innocent keeps excommunicating them, then letting them back, then excommunicating them, then letting them back, because of different transgressions. Read about the Fourth Crusade. It's brilliant. It's so hilarious.
This actually helps to illustrate another point, a misconception, which was that it was Islam versus Christianity. And I just, it was a clash of civilizations. And that just makes me laugh. I mean, you have all these, first off, you had different kinds of, in the very beginning, you had different kinds of Muslims already fighting each other. When the Crusaders arrived, the Shia Arabs were fighting against the Sunni Turks. And the Sunni Turks were just fighting against each other. Then you've got the fact, you had sort of a division between the Eastern, basically Latin Christianity and Greek Christianity, essentially. And then you had the fact that often the Crusaders would ally, so the Christian forces every now and again actually allied themselves with Muslim forces, like with the Fatimids or with some other Muslim polities in the fight against the Muslim forces, and that the Christian forces, like you're illustrating, would often kill each other or attack each other, and you have these fallings out and all these. It's a joke when people say that it was like Islamic civilization versus Christian civilization. No, it was one party of Christians, or a couple of parties of Christians coming in, sometimes allying with Muslims, killing other Muslims, and often fighting with each other. Hardly Islam versus Christian. Of course. I mean, even look at the way that they viewed themselves. The Christians were called, the Muslims didn't call them Christians. The people who were coming in were called by Muslims, or by Arabs and Turks. They were known as the Franks, the Farangi. Whilst the Muslims were called by, the people of the Levant were called by the Christians the Saracens, which is Arab, which is kind of a little bit synonymous with Muslim, but Saracen means Arab, and that was what. So the Muslims were called Arabs, and the Christians were called Franks. Yeah. I mean, not really a massive war of religion. Civilization, more just like a little.
Well, are you sure? I wouldn't read too much into that label. I mean, there's a lot of people who are very xenophobic, and for their purposes, all Muslims might as well be Arabs. You know what I mean? And they don't care to learn any more and I'm sure that there's equivalent generalizations and stereotypes. I mean, it's like
European, right? Like the term for Europeans in Arabic is usually franc. So it goes both ways. But the point wasn't. I mean, it's just an interesting point to look at. Like the main point is that it was
term for them, right?
The main point is that it was some Christians killing other Christians and some Muslims and allying with some Muslims. It wasn't Christians versus Muslims as two large blocks. That's the point. And then as an interesting afterthought, also, it's funny that they didn't even refer to themselves as Christians and Muslims versing each other. It was primarily the terms used were actually ethnic terms. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is another interesting point to look at in light of the fact that it wasn't just Christianity versus Islam. I mean, and the Christians when they conquered Jerusalem, they were killing other kinds of Christians as well, Jews and heretical Christians.
Well, actually, that's an interesting thing. When the First Crusades first started, there was a moment where they all said, well, if we're going to kill these non-Christians, there's lots of non-Christians in our own cities. And you had
Germany,
massive pogroms of Jews, massive ones, wiped them out in few cities. So, it was there is an element of that.
I wonder, are the Jews at this point in history still considered Middle Easterners?
Not really. They're just considered what they're always considered, people who earn a lot of money by doing things that they wouldn't do. Christianity still has this link with the idea of loaning money that still exists in Islam at the time. They still have the idea that you can't charge interest because that's creating something from nothing and only God's allowed to do that, and all that. That is still in Christianity as well. So they still have this dislike of the Jews because of that. And so any excuse...
That's not why Muslims don't do interest, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, that's why the Christians didn't.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, anyway.
Yeah, that was the Christian excuse.
Really quick, someone asked a couple questions. The first they asked was, what about a story involving the Templars and an incident on Friday the 13th? Do you know what he was referring to?
The Templars?
Yes.
Which particular story about the Templars?
I don't know. That was the extent of the question.
The destruction of them, why they were picked on by the French.
The question was the Templars and the Friday the 13th incident.
Does it have to do with vampires or werewolves?
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Well, because we all know from Dan Brown that Templars now rule the world. So
So anyway, all right. Well, if the person,
can we move it on to
if the person who sent me that question wants to clarify, but they also sent me another question. They said they'd like to hear about the end of the Crusades and the Catholic Church's involvement. I assume that he means of
Catholic
Church, yeah, the Latin Church.
Because someone actually also asked what the Coptic Church was up to.
They were probably on the receiving end of the swords of the Latin Christians, from what I understand. I thought Coptics were treated pretty shabbily by the Crusaders in general.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, occasionally the Coptics would let the Crusaders into a city and so get off lightly because they'd done that. But, they're pretty poorly treated. Everybody... I mean, the lives of the Coptic Christians and other forms of Christianity were worse under the Crusaders than they were under Islam. It has to be said. Islam would, as it did, the usual thing, pay some tax, where pay, etc., etc. Whereas the Christians would give them a hard time if they were lucky. If they were unlucky, they'd give them a hard time.
So the options were peasants or a hard time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I think it was just hard time.
Which would you choose? Peasantry or hard time?
Well, I don't know what the difference is. Isn't peasantry a hard time, or am I missing something?
Yeah, but one's a hard time with the risk of death, and the other's a hard time where you just have a hard time.
It's funny, like that article I read where it said, "Well, we're liberating them from tyranny of the Mohammedans." I wonder. And then there was what Klingschor also said about how the initial Muslim conquest had sort of faded into history. I want what is the demographic breakdown at this point? Are there still many Eastern Eastern tradition Christians amongst the Near Eastern population, or have they mostly all converted to Islam by this point?
Most of the conversions had happened by this point. I mean, most people don't realize that the conversion to Islam took like 400 years.
Okay, yeah.
But by it, like it was really under the Abbasids, like late Abbasid, by that point that most people were really converting and had converted to Islam.
So
it took a really long time.
So okay. If the Crusades had taken place within a century of the initial spread of Islam,
then no one would have been Muslim. Yeah, they would have
then there would have been more, at least some credibility to their claim that they were liberating people who. But I guess it really wasn't even about liberating people who. It wasn't, what do you call it? Irredentism. You know what I mean? They weren't liberating people who were under an occupation, people who were different and that sympathized with the Crusaders. I mean, they had long since abandoned whatever identity linked those people. So I guess the only people who could have claimed it as a defensive measure would have been, to an extent, the Byzantines, because they just recently lost additional territory to the Turks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah. Nothing to add to that, really. Yeah.
All right. Can I move it on then?
I brushed up on this stuff like at the last fucking minute, and I'm just proud of myself for holding my own. I was like, I'm going to embarrass myself. I'll just let Kling and Richard talk. But
another.
I was just going to say. We're being.
Sorry, you go.
Go on.
Don't start patting yourself on the back just yet.
What were you going to say, Richard?
I was just going to say, we're asked a question about the end of the Crusades. Now, this is a very, very complicated question, because what the hell do you mean by the end of the Crusades? Because it is argued by John Riley Smith that they ended in 1798 with a Hospitalia attack. I think it's from Malta. Let me have a look. I've got it in here. Yeah, Abuka Bay, the Battle of Abuka Bay in 1798 is said to be the end of the Crusades. Other people say the end of the Seventh Crusade. Now,
who was attacking and defending in the battle with the Hospitallers?
The Grandmaster. I'll read what I've got here. Notes. I made notes earlier. Grandmaster of Hospitalius Ferdinand von Hompesch, 12 knights and 2 sergeants at arms left Malta for Trieste. The French occupy Malta. It's basically pushing Napoleon out of Malta.
What?
So, the last Crusade.
Napoleon occupied Malta.
Yeah. But if we're talking about the last Levant Crusade, the last Crusade to Jerusalem, we're talking about the Seventh Crusade. And that was brought about, frankly, by the Mamluks kicking ass and just saying, driving us out. That was what that was. The
Mamluks were vicious.
Yeah.
There's some really nasty stories about Baybur. Is it Baybur or is it Baburs?
Baybars.
Yeah.
Baybars. Yeah.
They're Baybars. And yeah, they were vicious enough to one of the few people who handed the Mongols their asses to them. They were pretty tough, those guys, has to be said. So, and also another influence on the end of the Crusade was the Mongols themselves.
So
yeah, because the Mongols came in. This weird third group who no one could quite work out came along, pushed you guys remember Kazi, begins with K, the group who lived in the Turkish Kazakstani Turks, I think they were, pushed them across into that.
Oh wait, which is it Kyrgyz or
the Khwarezmian Turks
were
pushed across. They were then.
That is a tough one.
Khwarezmian, yeah.
Because it's a really hard to pronounce.
I just know it because of the mathematician guy.
Yeah.
Khwarezmi, yeah.
So that movement that unsettled the region. They were eventually involved in a final recapture of Jerusalem, and the Mongols had a lot of very powerful indirect influence on what happened in the region, because all of a sudden, as well as fighting each other, as well as fighting the Crusaders and the Crusaders fighting them, and the Crusade and the sort of Levant Catholic kingdoms fighting each other and fighting, there was these weird group who, at first, the Pope sent envoys out thinking it was Prester John, and thinking, hey, We finally found him. They can help us. We can take the region. And finding no, it's when their heads were sent back, he realised it wasn't Prester John. And then you've got either that or Prester John was not a happy guy. And nobody quite knew what to do about this threat. It was terrifying. All they knew is that if they could survive the winter, they disappeared. And they couldn't work that out. And then they reappeared next winter and started raiding and kicking ass again. And then they disappeared. There are people who argue it had an indirect effect on the eventual Malmud uprising and that area. You know, the whole uprising that led to, in effect, the end of the Crusades of that type. Because I think at that point, the Catholic Church hadn't got the. They'd just given up, frankly. They just thought, you know, this new group who have just driven us out. It's taking too much time, too much money, too much effort, and the romance had gone out of it. If we're going to simplify it, the romance of taking Jerusalem had. When they kind of had a foothold, when they still had Antioch and Tyre, you know, that was fine. But when they were totally out of there, it was sort of, do we really need to do this again? And other things were happening by this point in the world.
I'm sure that there were some people grumbling that they'd experienced having it and not having it, and they didn't notice a remarkable difference.
So
Yeah.
having and not having what?
Jerusalem.
So, I mean, they hadn't had Jerusalem time by the time they were thrown out. It took a long time for that to happen. So really, they were just. I think the Western world had resigned itself to not having Jerusalem. So when they lost Antioch and Acre and Tyre, and it was time to else.
Can I move the conversation to another misconception, which is flipping
Okay.
hilarious. The Jihad was invented as a response to the Crusades.
Well, just to preface, this is a misconception you're debunking, yes?
Yes.
Because you didn't say that before you spoke, so it made it sound like it was your point of view.
No, I did. Oh, maybe
You might have
say that.
mumbled a bit.
No, you did.
Guard yourself
I
against
heard it.
quote mining.
Ali heard.
Okay, never mind then. I
Me
apologize.
too.
Everybody but me is right.
Atheismo is taking a cat nap, and then he woke up when he heard Jihad. Should be pretty quick. There's a couple of ayahs.
Was Jihad invented before or after the Crusades? Before. Okay, misconception debunked. I mean, like seriously, like in all the major. I don't understand Muslims who make these kinds of arguments. In every single, or in most of the major hadith collections of the Kutub as-Sitah, of the 6 canonical hadith collections of Sunni Islam, most of them have a book, right? Because they've got books of subjects, and most of them have a book, Kitab al-Jihad, the book of struggle. And can you guess what in most of them, what the Kitab al-Jihad is devoted to? What these hadiths under the title of Jihad are talking about? Can you hazard a guess, a conjecture, a possible, thought as to what the Kitab al-Jihad concerns itself with?
Fighting.
Does it have to do with saving
it's spiritual inner struggle?
Saving babies from the plague.
Saving you've got it. Yes, that's exactly what they are.
Wasn't it? Oh man.
No, of course it's Muhammad killing people and attacking people and this raid and that raid and this little genocide and this battle. That's what it's about. It is what it's. It has always been about that. Like I don't understand. Oh, jihad means it means struggle, but struggle is in battle. Like sure, there was. Sorry.
In the Quran, they're in a few surahs, but one at least sort of
Tawbah.
Al-Tawbah. There's one that says quite clearly, do jihad in the name of Allah with your money and yourselves. This does not mean struggle against one's own thoughts. Okay, you don't throw money at yourself, your own thoughts. You just can't. You can't make that out to be anything other than.
Now, the thing is, right? Jihad also does mean it's struggle, right? So
No,
it can also mean.
hang on.
It can also mean spiritual struggle.
Stop, Kling. In Arabic, both classic and modern, there are different verbal forms. Anyone who studied Latin or Finnish or a language that has many additional cases that English and other languages like English don't have knows that there's a gluttonation in certain languages, including Arabic, which gives a much more precise meaning to the same word. Now, in the case of verb forms 5 and 6, those are the passive and reflexive. So if you use something, if you take a verb that, like let's just say the verb to kick, but then you inflect it for verb form 6, you say to kick, but because it's a gluttonative, it means to kick yourself. You understand? It also works with groups. So, for example, if say we are arguing, if we do that in verb form 1, 2, or 3, it means we're arguing against someone else. But if I say we are arguing in verb form 6, it means we here on the panel are arguing with each other. It's reflexive. So if you look, you can easily verify it for yourself. And there is one passage in the Quran that uses that form, and it says, one must make war against yourself. When Muslim apologists quote that is a real verse. But in all the other instances, it is in one of the earlier the other verb forms that clearly indicate that you as the subject are to act against a foreign object. So it's very clear with no room for confusion. So when people say that, they are mistaken.
Well, you're not saying that about the example that I've just.
Which
Surah Al-Tawbah 41.
I'd have to look it up right now just to be sure. As a matter of fact, I will.
Whilst you do that, I'll just clarify, right?
That's not
Go
ahead.
In Islamic theology, there is also inner jihad. That's true. There is the jihad struggle against sin, I suppose, or struggle to achieve more perfect tawheed or whatever. But when Muslims use this, that they say this as though it kind of nullifies the existence of the lesser jihad, which is the physical military struggle, which as if to kind of make it, it's all which is a crock of shit. I mean, there is such a long and proud tradition of holy war, jihad, in Islamic tradition. There is a very strong holy war tradition, and it was. I mean, this idea that all right, it does exist, but it's defensive. I mean, like, what a joke, really. I mean, it was. I mean, what the Umayyads did was a jihad to expand the Muslim polity. I mean, it was. I mean, I think it was Imam Shafi who formulated the doctrine of eternal, perpetual jihad against all unbelievers because they are unbelievers, right? And he got his basis for this from the Quran. Although, the Quran's of course a very vague book, so you can.
What was the verse number again, Ali? Surah and verse by number? I don't remember.
Right.
But yeah, jihad was definitely not invented in response to the Crusades, and anyone who says that
we're talking the context of the one that I'm saying is before battle. This Quranic verse comes down. I mean, this is just we're talking about battle.
Is that the Asbab and Nuzul?
It's in the Tafsir, Ibn Kathir, because he also mentions the reasons for why the verses were brought down, if he has them. And so he mentions hadiths that go along with why it was said, or what the context was of these surahs being of these revelations. And this is why. I mean, it is when we say jihad, it's in the Quran. You don't even have to go to hadiths and all this. And I mean, I guess you have to figure out exactly what it means, but if you didn't have them and you had to just read it and find out for yourself what it said, it would be very difficult to come up with another one. And then when you look at the tafsirs and you find out, yeah, well, the context was this was before one of Muhammad's wars. Oh yeah, okay.
Which ayah was it?
Yeah, let me. It's Surah Al-Tawbah, and it's ayat for Tawbah, which is how you say it in Arabic, but I don't know how you would fuck that up with your English pronunciation.
Surah al what?
Tawbah.
So it's Surah 9.
Tawbah.
But which verse?
It's 41. This is 41. Verse 41. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It is
now this was revealed. All right, so in the Asbab and Nuzul, so in the context of the revelation by Al-Wahidi, he talks about how this was revealed. This was revealed to chastise the so-called munafiqun, the hypocrite. Oh no, the hypocrites are wrong. The dissimulators, people who followed Muhammad but disagreed with him politically. And he's saying because some of the Muhammad's followers didn't want to do jihad, and so Muhammad revealed Surah At-Tawbah ayah 41 to sort of command them, you have to go and fight for me, basically.
Yeah, this was because of people were trying to get out of going with Muhammad to fight, basically.
Yeah, this was. I think this is the context of this was Tabuk. I think Muhammad was trying to get them to go to battle up in Northern Arabia and Syria.
That's right. It was in the same year as Ghazwat Tabuk. So, I mean, there's no way you could say that that's not what. Now, your point is that there is such a thing as the internal jihad or whatever. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Well.
But certainly not every context.
Yeah, well,
the fact that we say
that's the point.
Yeah,
the internal jihad doctrine doesn't nullify
is not something they made up after Saladin.
And that's the thing. The whole doctrine of internal jihad was a doctrine that really came into play after the jihads had conquered, the Middle East and North Africa, and then after all the war had happened and people were no longer in a battle-y frontier context, people kind of they didn't really need to do military jihad anymore.
This is
the doctrine of spiritual jihad became prevalent.
Here's a saying
after the battles.
Here's a saying from the book of Jihad that Klingschor mentioned earlier. This is narrated by Ibn Habban.
Wait, which book of Jihad is this? Al-Bukhari or
Ibn Nuhas?
No, maybe who's the dude who collected this?
Ibn Nuhas.
Oh, so this is the work of fiqh.
Okay. Anyway,
you should always use Bukhari and Muslim when talking.
Yeah, well, okay. I know. I'm just saying.
So the point is that there are many kitab al-jihad.
Yeah, I know. Okay, fair enough. The point that I just thought this was quaint. Ibn Habban, if we can take his word for it, feel free not to. Narrates. The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was asked about the best form of jihad. He said, the best form of jihad is one in which your horse is slain and your blood is spilled. Yeah. I mean, that's a hell of a personal struggle.
Also, it's not. This is not an up for grabs thing. And another ayah, Al-Umran, ayah 169, it talks specifically about martyrdom, about the idea that. When you die, you don't really die. You're by God's side, making money or whatever. I don't know.
Now here's another one. Here's another hadith. This is one that occurs in Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah, which are part of the Big Six, but not part of the. None of those are Sahih collections. But it's interesting. It's also a quote by Muhammad saying the best jihad is the word of justice in front of an oppressive ruler. Now, again, this shows that the term can be used in an abstract, but it's still, in most of the forms you find it, it's transitive. It's you acting against someone else,
But see, it doesn't matter that there are other forms of jihad. It doesn't matter that you can use jihad to mean inner struggle. It doesn't matter you can use it to mean, you're a shitty ruler.
Okay,
one of the established uses and a big tradition around that is military.
Well,
At long last, I stopped getting sidetracked and went to the verse that Dali was talking about. It's wajahidu, and it is verb form 3 imperative, meaning it is transitive. So it's not reflexive like I talked about before. You're not being commanded to do something that only affects you.
No.
You're doing something that affects something other than yourself. So. Let's back. I think we're beating a dead horse, worse than the horse in that hadith. But I think we've made our point.
Yeah.
It has to be said that when people say things like this, like the argument, many times they sincerely don't know, and often it's because they're practicing the religion that they were raised in, and they superimpose the value systems of their parents and community onto scriptures that they often haven't read. So they just say, okay, well, the people who tucked me into bed and kissed me on the forehead weren't bad people, so I'll believe this kind of sugar-coated bullshit. So I mean, we're certainly not going to say, okay, well, each and every Muslim who says this is trying to get one over on you, because that's probably not the case. I mean, So
that's absolutely true. I mean, we can't stress that enough. That yes, we obviously know that that's absolute crap, and Muhammad, this was one of his mainstays. But you definitely, when a Muslim says this, you should point out to them, hey, no, that's not true. The evidence is here, here, and here. Go look it up for yourself, because you're right. A lot of Muslims don't even know where the prayers occur. Right? They pray 5 times a day, and they don't even know that there is no prayer in the Quran. They don't know the most basic things about their own religion. So when you talk to a Muslim about things like jihad or even taqiyya, which is a little bit more controversial and there's a lot to be said about it. But if you meet a Muslim who says, don't automatically assume that person is lying to you. Assume first that they just don't know, because it's most likely the case that they just don't know.
That's the thing. The overwhelming majority of Muslims are incredibly ignorant concerning the history, scripture, theology of their religion. It's the same as Christians, actually. Exactly the same. Most Muslims haven't read the Quran.
Your audio quality has declined for some reason. If you change something, you should change it back. Richard, you look like you had something to say, and we've left you in the cold for a while we talked about doctrine.
I was just going to say, all the currently translated Arabic sources for the Crusades, and I was going to read the number of times it mentions the jihad in retaliation to them. So there you go. Everything else is brought up. Lots of other ideas, concepts, doctrines, and so on. But there's no mention of jihad at the time. Now, I'm going to open that to you guys because you know more about that side of it than me. But does that mean anything? That it's not?
Yes.
We're talking about the retaliation as well. So.
This goes to demonstrate my other point, which is that it wasn't Christianity versus Islam. It was political polities that happened to be Muslim versus political polities that happened to be Christian. Although the Christians did have Christian piety in Jerusalem in mind, on the Muslim side, it was less of a religious struggle and more of policies that happened to be Muslim. It was more over the territory and the land and imperialism. I think it was Ephraim Karsh. There's a book called Islamic Imperialism. And in it, the author talks about Saladin and talks about how really, for him, he argues that it was more about Saladin's land and imperialism and legacy than it was about Muslim piety. So I think that is really interesting. That it wasn't really seen as a big religious war on the Muslim side. So that is an interesting point. I mean, and the thing is, right, that jihads no longer have...
Well, I mean, the thing is, it didn't need to be a religious war on their side. When a bunch of cannibal paladins come crashing down from the west and kick your door in, it doesn't... those issues are rendered moot, but I mean, it eventually... religious issues eventually became a trump card for some of the more parochial politics, I would think.
But see, jihad was a frontier thing. And that's why it wouldn't have been big in their psyche. What wasn't significant to them was because jihad was expanding the borders of the Islamic Commonwealth, Dar al-Islam, the Ummah. Like it was something that you went off to do in the Sahel, in Africa, or in Central Asia against the pagan or the shamanistic Turks. And so in the center, in the heartlands of the Islamic Commonwealth, they had forgotten about military jihad. It had become, jihad is your spiritual inner struggle, which is probably why it wasn't, that there wasn't a big, they didn't really employ the term jihad, or it wasn't really seen as a jihad, the Crusades. Because the idea of military jihad had moved on to the frontiers.
Okay.
So there were still jihads going on at the time, just not in that area. There was, all the jihads were going on in the Sahel and in Africa.
Yeah. I just want to. I also want to make sure, because I see this is a bit of a delicate business of trying to say what Muslims know and don't know, because I mean it's hard to also, while a lot of Muslims don't really know what their religion is, the majority of Muslims know that jihad means to go and fight the infidel, regardless of what the reason is. And it comes up a lot, even like, for instance, on Egyptian television nowadays, when the Salafists and the fundamentalists talk about jihad, the secularists will say, jihad against who? We're all Muslims. And so it's really a bit of a difficult business, because I don't know. Now I'm making no sense, but
no. Concerning this particular issue, like in general, most Muslims, I find, in my own personal experience, tend to be tremendously ignorant of the Quran and Hadith and Islamic history and theology and stuff, as is exactly the same with every religion. Most of the adherents, it's more of a cultural thing, really. It's just what they've been brought up on. But in the case of jihad, I would say, most Muslims in the Muslim world are aware, because it's not like they don't have to hide it from anyone. It's not like a bad thing. They're like, jihad was military expansion. But in the West, I think most Western Muslims have interacted with on this subject are ignorant and do believe, most of them do believe that jihad either isn't holy war or is only purely in self-defense in times of great need. I think that is the case with most West, because they've grown up in the West where holy war is very frowned upon, and it isn't looked upon in a romantic fashion as it is in the Muslim world. They've adopted, that's influenced them, and so they just right out the bat they would deny that Islam is aggressive holy war. Apart from the Salafis and their ilk, they would be like, jihad, holy war. But most Western Muslims, I think, would be ignorant.
See that? So that's funny. Now I don't know very much about Europe and the prevalence of that kind of thing there. But I mean, I see an awful lot of picket signs saying Islam will conquer. The flag of Islam will fly over Downing Street. Okay.
In all the big riots, it's usually the Salafis. Like in Egypt, people storming the American embassy a couple of months ago. Well, I think Salafis, from what I remember. For example,
same thing here in Germany.
Don't make that mistake. It's not just the Salafis.
No, but it was.
You can very easily get a mob of just regular old people to go and burn down embassies.
I believe it was
not very difficult.
And organizations who were the driving force.
Called for the original protest, maybe. Yeah.
And in Australia, the people who were made things really worse with the whole Muhammad thing. I'm from what I remember, were also like a Salafi-esque group who were really got people riled up.
Look at Europe. Look what is happening here. There's a guy in Germany who has an American Express black card. He is on social welfare, and he manages to spend 350,000 euros on printing the Quran and giving it away for free to Germans.
Saudi Arabia.
Then when the
Saudi
people
Arabia.
protest this, they go into the some King Fahid Academy or something, which is in Bonn, the old capital. And they go and they riot, throwing stones. They pull knives and they knife some policemen. And this is Salafis.
Yeah. But anyway, look, I don't want to get side. Let's return to the Crusades, because there's one more misconception.
That's
There's one more misconception that I've been looking forward to the most. And this misconception is that it was good Muslims versus bad Christians. And this will tie into that epic documentary of 100% accuracy.
Wait a minute. Did you say that was a misconception?
Yes, that it was good Muslims versus bad Christians. That is a misconception.
That's true. That's true.
Yes, sorry, my bad. I was wrong. The Muslims were just founts of ethics, and
I've seen halos
yeah
in history books, and
yes. And all the Crusaders had horns. All the Crusaders had horns. It was and little forked tails, and they all their weapon of choice was the pitchfork.
Hey, you guys just said that they were cannibals, and so I mean, you gotta fight against the cannibals in this one.
But
but you know,
in all seriousness.
I was just going to say, according to some of the Christian documents, the Muslims did really, really bad things. Like one of them says that they let a woman fight. So you know, which I doubt, but that's what he says. Oh my God! There is actually someone I know has found.
They would do.
All right, I take it back. The Muslims were horrible. Letting a woman fight? Jesus.
I was about to say,
can I take you back really quick, Richard, to something you said before?
Uh-huh.
You said that there was an attitude among some of the Europeans that allowing women amongst them was sinful. Are you talking marching with the army or just settling in the Near Eastern colonies?
there were times when they were not doing as well as they might. There were women that were known as camp women. It doesn't mean that they went around going chase me, or anything like that. They were basically they were the prostitutes, frankly, and they would follow the camps around. Now, occasionally, when they lost a big battle
in the desert,
when they
awesome.
When they lost a huge battle, they would blame the presence of these women on losing the battle, and they would throw them out of the city, town, whatever, until they've forgotten, and then they'd come back in again and service the soldiers once more. It was a reoccurring thing. But interestingly, I was just going to say, there's a friend of mine called Sarah Lambert. She's basically a medieval Crusades and women's scholar, and she's found a manuscript written by the brother of a woman at the time who fought in the Crusades, and she's currently translating it. So there were women
on what side?
Other than you, woman, on the Crusaders' side. There were apparently, according to some sources, female Islamic bow women as well. I think it's the Westerners creating the Amazon myth, personally. But that's in the record as well. But yeah, there's definitely this one woman who threw her brother, because he couldn't read or write, and the brother claims to have fought in the Crusades and marched with them. So I can't wait till that book comes out, because I'll give that a read. That'll be interesting.
I know that the Turks, most of the Muslims who the Crusaders were fighting against were Turks, by the way. People don't realize there weren't really very many battles with the Fatimids that I'm aware of. The primary foe was the Seljuk successor states in the Levant, including the Mamluks. And they would have, I think they would have their concubines with them in their encampments, in their tents. And what would happen is that when the Turks lost and the Crusaders, conquered and went into their camps, what the Crusaders would do, and this is quite interesting because this shows two completely different practices here, because the Crusaders prided themselves in that they didn't rape the women. They would kill them.
Oh, yes.
The Crusaders were very proud of the fact that they didn't rape the women. They would just go in and just lance them all in the belly. like
Yeah.
with a lance. Not a funny metaphor. Whereas the Muslim forces, from some of the accounts I've read, took great, well, not pride, but I guess joy in raping all the women they captured.
What?
Oh, and this gets on to this gets.
Are we talking about a one-off rape, or are we talking about these?
No, this is like the Muslim jurisprudence. So I can't get the right because I've been eating more almonds.
It's fine.
But this is Islamic jurisprudence in action. This is following the precedent set down by Muhammad in how to deal with captured women, because they would capture the women. The Islamic State or polity authority, which would be in this case Saladin and his government, would divvy up the women, and then they were concubines, and so they would rape them.
Right, that's what I was asking. Is it one-off rape and then they toss them to the side, or is it
it was the systematic practice of divvying up booty.
Right.
And so, I mean, Muslims are like, oh, all the women wanted to have sex with their captors, but no. And there's one quote. Where's that quote that I read you the other day, Richard? That one from Imad ad-Din al-Isfahani, who was Saladin's personal chronicler. And there's a quote, and it's let's see, website Crusades. Here we go.
Find it.
I've got it. And so basically, this is a quote from Saladin's chronicler, and this is why I laugh from that when I watched that movie. I mean, I do love the movie Kingdom of Heaven. I love that movie, but it's a fiction. It's a complete fiction. The idea that Saladin was like this noble, like, I am, when the Crusaders came to Jerusalem, says Orlando Bloom, they killed the Muslims. Well, and then why wouldn't you do a response? And then Saladin's like, I am not those Muslims. And it's oh, you noble savage, you. But the reality is a little different. And this is what Saladin allowed or let his army do when they conquered Jerusalem. And I quote, "Women and children together came to 8,000 and were quickly divided up among us being the Muslim conquerors, bringing a smile to Muslim faces at their lamentations.
Wow.
How many well-guarded women were profaned, how many queens were ruled, and nubile girls married, and noble women given away, and miserly women forced to yield themselves, and women who had been kept hidden stripped of their modesty, and serious women made ridiculous, and women kept in private now set in public, and free women occupied, and precious ones used for hard work, and pretty things put to the test, and virgins dishonored, and proud women deflowered, and prostrated, and
wait, is this the same person saying all of this?
This is like a Japanese hentai where Riona is the...
And happy ones made to weep. How many noblemen took them as concubines? How many ardent men blazed for one of them, and celibates were satisfied by them, and thirsty men sated by them, and turbulent men able to give vent to their passion. Quote unquote.
Yeah.
By whom? Who's the quote by?
Imad ad-Din al-Isfahani, the personal biographer of Saladin.
So
it's kind of like the primary...
So this guy was... The author of this book was allegedly in attendance of the battle.
Yes.
But it's his choice of words.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like he just really has a sick fixation with the subjugation of women.
Yeah.
But I wonder.
Yes, but what he's referring to in so many words is that the captured women and children of Jerusalem were but he's referring to women in particular here in this instance. So the captured women of Jerusalem were divvied up as concubines, as booty, as sex slaves for the Muslim conquerors. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just something about his choice of expression. It seems like he definitely had a massive erection when he was writing that. Yeah.
I think that's quite evident from the text. That's my sophisticated historical analysis of.
Someone commented and said, not sure how Atheismo can say that it's sick in that era. I think that his choice of words in particular is downright sociopathic. Because I mean, if you go back to, for example, the Trojan War and the romantic histories that survive of that, some of the great heroes on the Greek side were also just flat up rapists. They either took women captive or raped them one time and then tossed them aside. So I mean, this is the attitude of taking women as captives, the attitude of them being property to be traded, and I mean, you know, like the feud between Agamemnon and Achilles starts over a woman, and it's like, oh, I want her to be at my loom. No, she's going to be at my loom, and then it'll be. You know, and that started this feud between them. So I mean, it goes back a long way, and like so many other things. You know,
wait a minute. Besides all that, why couldn't you say that it was sick back then, without all the stuff that you've just? I think what they're saying is, anyways.
I think what they're asking is, why am I picking on this one person? Because it's my fault for saying that this individual author seemed to have such a fixation, and I stand by that because it just seems like the way he drones on, and it's not like a footnote for him. It's not like, yeah, we captured a lot of women, some of them were easy on the eye. He seemed to just draw out the thought of women who held position being humiliated, and I think that really is a comment on his individual psychosis above and beyond.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I just, to the commenter who was saying that, I don't think that that even deserves a dignified answer. Why wouldn't you be able to say that it was sick in that era?
Well, you know, what's funny is I think that you know, a lot of times in critique of you know, the actions of people in antiquity.
Right, but we're talking about the way that people idealize Saladin and the way they do stuff.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly okay to say, no, he was just as sick, a bigger...
He was just as much as
yeah, right, exactly. He was just as big of a fuckhead as the rest of them were. And that's sick. Well, why not? Why couldn't you say that?
Yeah, it's one thing to say that you're a product of your environment, and another thing to say you're bad even for them. But
see, the thing is, his language is very florid, but the sentiment is no different from like it's in keeping with Islamic war custom. Like, this is no different from what Timur did. Timur Khani, or Timur Ilang, they did similar things.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the fact.
And
wait a minute. Let me say this. I'm not talking about the fact that women were used as spoils of war. I'm talking about this author's choice of words and how much he relishes. Okay, he's writing.
His sexual sadism.
His other hand is busy as his right hand is writing this. Okay, he emphasizes not the actual the sexualization of them, but their humiliation.
Yeah. Yes. So one of the things, I mean, I don't know much about the Arabic writers and the way they wrote, but if this was the other way round, if it was talking about the way women were being treated like that on the other side, the simple word is monstering. It's not so much about women and rape, it's about, look how these creatures, we disposed of them, how worthless they are. We just toss them aside and their women don't matter.
It's supreme objectification.
Yeah, and it's
someone in the chat has suggested that the reason these Arabic the translations of the Arabic like documents like that is taking so long, as you complained, is that some of the pages are sticking together.
I'm just going to read something else that Saladin did, if that's okay, but this is a little bit more understandable.
Please.
But it's still kind of brutal. There's a guy called Renaud of Chatillon who basically broke a treaty with Saladin and started taking his supply trains out. And after Hattin, the Battle of the Horns of Hattin, he captured him along with I believe it's King Richard, although he never says in the document, it just says the king. It says here, this is by...
What was his name?
For those,
what was the guy's name who was raiding the things?
Renaud of de Chatillon.
This is actually in the movie, Kingdom of Heaven. This is the big red-haired dude who's the evil bad Templar in the movie.
Yeah, this is actually interesting because there's a Western account of the story I'm going to give in which it says he was also known as Rufus before he had red beard. So you see, there was discrimination against gingers even back then. Because anyway, this is by Ibn al-Athir, who was one of the other chroniclers. Well, who was Look it up, Klings. You know him now, Arthur is. Anyway, he says, when all the prisoners had been taken, Saladin went to his tent and sent for the king of the Franks and Prince Arnat, that's what they call Renaud, of Karak. He had the king seated beside him, and as he was half dead with thirst, gave him iced water to drink. The king drank, and handed the rest to the prince, who also drank. Saladin said, "This godless man did not have my permission to drink, and will not save his life that way." He turned to the prince, casting his crimes in his teeth and enumerating his sin. Then he rose and with his own hand cut off the man's head. So
this is in the movie. This is actually in the movie.
That is the only bit of that movie which is actually backed up in the sources, and it's not only in the Ibn al-Athir, it's also found in the continuation of the William of Tyre. So both sides talk about this particular story. So there you see, that film's not entirely bullshit. There are snippets of bits. So there you go.
I'm surprised that they actually included that. Like that they actually it's almost word for word. You know, it's the same narrative.
He also went on then to kill all the Hospitalier and Templar knights, all 3,000 of them. He bought them off the people who captured them and wanted them as slaves, and then beheaded the lot. But I think that was tactical. You know, they were the best fighters out there, and he basically wiped them out. Wise move. So it was worth the money. But yeah, see, people keep knocking that film, but there's at least 40 seconds of truth in there.
Well, I mean, the issue of relative morality when judging the ancients, I think that the fact that it's such a sensitive topic today, and that obviously there's this, the religion has made ancient bullshit strangely relevant, you know, because we're talking about the Crusades, and we're talking about some of the practices by Muslim warlords as well. A lot of people obviously are quick to criticize the career of the Prophet of Islam when he was a warlord. And the thing is, if it weren't for the fact that the Crusaders or the Companions, you know, I know different eras, but you know what I mean. If people of these groups weren't part of this continuous religious tradition, nobody would care. They would still read the stories and still maybe find them interesting. But for example, you know, just at the tail end of the Crusades, the Mongolians, as you say, show up on the scene, and they were arguably far more brutal than anybody who was already operating in the region. I mean, they say that when Baghdad was sacked by Ulago, he didn't camp in the city because he made so many corpses that he himself couldn't stand the stench of his own handiwork. I mean, so, but then who condemns the Mongolians? Nobody cares because Genghis Khan wasn't a religious leader. You know?
Anyone wants South
Break my shitty wall.
Yeah, my shitty wall. How you like my sweet and spicy?
See, Genghis Khan didn't found a religious tradition. He did claim to have some divine backing, but he was basically the closest thing you have to a secular warrior. And then the other thing is, you know, you don't have Mongolians today who say that he was a man of peace, and you're like, well, you practice the religion of Genghis Khan, so I guess you ride around and shoot people with the bow and arrow and go horseback, and they say, no, you're ignorant. Genghis Khan never did those things. Yeah, you have to ride a proverbial horse and fire a metaphysical arrow.
General that ever walked the face of the earth.
You have to proverbially shag everything that moves.
Yeah, whatever the equivalent of Zionists are to the Mongolians. It's a Zionist conspiracy that a quarter of humanity have Genghis Khan's genetics in them because the amount of women that he has sex with. It's a Chinese conspiracy, or it's a Russian conspiracy, or whatever their enemy is.
Yeah, but like I said, in the accounts of the Trojan War, I don't think the story of Ajax raping the priestess is in the Iliad itself, but it's part of the larger text surrounding that war. And you had these guys, a bunch of Grecian horn dogs raping all these Trojan women and taking them as captives, and yet there's just a lack of condemnation, like when you read any piece of literature where I mean, it's no different than reading, we treat it like racial expletives in a Mark Twain novel. You know what I mean? It's just, that's just part of the local flavor back in that time, but yet, when there's a religious contingent, it becomes relevant whether we like it or not, because there's always that specter of will the modern inheritors of this tradition stand by or repent of the actions. And we on the show have already reviewed a lot of very sort of defensive remarks made by various people amongst Muslim scholarship or populism or what have you. But also, like when I was looking for an official statement on the Crusades by the Catholic Church, what I found was a lot of stuff that I hesitate to say whether it's official or not, but it is all just very defensive and very dismissive, and not in the slightest recalcitrant about Catholics saying, oh well, you may have heard a bunch of anti-Catholic rhetoric by a bunch of anti-Catholic bigots, a bunch of Catholophobes, or whatever you'd want to call them, but it's a lot of just defensive-ness, just throwing the accusation back and refusing to deal with the issue, or splitting hairs over details where they feel it's exaggerated. Very little in the way of apology, it seems, from more conservative both church fathers, even when Jean-Paul made the apology for the sacking of Constantinople, and he touched on the issue of the Crusades. There were church fathers who were openly critical of him, saying, he's saying, we're going to make us look weak, and so forth.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sure I interrupted you at some point with some pointless bullshit, Richard. So please continue.
No, it was fun. I mean, I'm going to plug a book because we're talking about women in the Crusades. The best book so far. It's only from the Crusader angle, but it's easy to remember. It's called Gendering the Crusades, and it's a collection of short essays, all but one of which are fantastic. One is terrible. It's about women warriors, and if you look at the sources, basically there's one source, and if you read that one source, they cite this article. It's terrible. But the rest of it, Gendering the Crusades, if you're interested in attitudes to women in the Crusades, I'll recommend, because why not? Somebody out there might like it. Where were we anyway?
How did it all wind down? I'm sorry, stop. Go ahead and ask your question. Excuse me.
I just have a question regarding the different groups that were either defending or attacking or whatever. What are Asharis?
Asharis?
The Ashari is a school of Islamic theology. Asharia.
Yeah, they were ascendant during the decline of the Mutazilite school.
Do you mean Ashari?
They
Ashari, but they had. This has nothing to do with the
Saladin
as such, because somebody told me that the Asharis actually go back all the way to the Crusades because they were founded during that time, because they were the true defenders of Jerusalem.
No, I don't know what they're talking about. But it sounds like they're saying Ashari, which I can't pronounce properly. But they're a school of Aqidah, a school of Islamic theology that were founded by al-Ashari in Baghdad in the Abbasid era.
Okay, but they are
very
not directly connected to the Crusades.
Well, Saladin was an Ashari, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so there's some...
He followed that theology, but it's not really relevant. I don't understand how it is actually at all relevant to the Crusades.
Well, do you think it galvanized the more...
No.
I mean, because basically you had non-literalist Mutazilites who for a long time during the era that described as the Golden Age, they were ascendant. Then they began to lose more and more hearts and minds to schools like the Asharite school. And do you think that in this time of crisis, it favored a more literalist dogmatic school?
So say that again?
I'm saying that okay, if you have a more, let's face it, liberal form of religiosity, and then a bunch of foreigners come in and start wrecking the place.
Oh yeah, sorry. I get what you mean. I mean, prosperity breeds liberalism.
Yes.
Pressure breeds conservatism. And generally that is true, but I don't know in this specific instance whether or not the Ash'aris or the people turned to the Hanabala or the
Ash'aris were created by
Al-Ash'ari.
Right, but he has a first name.
Okay, but the point is,
but
just it was in front of he was against the Mu'tazila, not the Crusades.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It's bullshit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you get so many claims by so many people, and you never know where to actually put them, and to go and investigate each one individually drives you up the wall. Okay, what about Salafis? Are IERA, for example, a Salafi group?
Do they openly brand themselves as Salafi?
Well, this is my question.
Hamza Sortis identifies himself as Hanbali, which is basically the basis for Salafism.
Well,
Salafism
it's the same madhab, but it's not
an extension of the Hanbali madhab.
Right,
I would call Salafis neo-Hanbali.
Yeah, but okay, it's like every rectangle is a square, not every square is a rectangle. Have you ever come across any IER documentation where they've openly used the term to describe themselves?
No, I have not found that anywhere. This is why I'm curious if there are indications, because it's a matter of interpretation, because they don't...
Yes, there are some indications. One is that Hamza Sortis identifies as Hanbali. Another is that I'm pretty sure they got funding from Qatar. Didn't they? Didn't the IERA get funding from Qatar?
Oh, no, that was his MTH or something. His previous organization.
But didn't they send envoys to Qatar and to the Gulf nations to try and get funding?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This was like 2-3 weeks ago. Yeah.
2 weeks.
Oh, really? I know. I meant like a year ago or something. So they must be doing it a couple of times. Right.
No, so he went to Fanar. I know that Hamza went to Fanar because Fanar was my favorite place. I mean, that was my favorite hangout now in the last years. And I remember that I thought, yes, what is an idiot like that doing at Fanar? Because Fanar, I thought, were great people. And yes, he was there.
Where is that city? I don't know where that city is.
Doha.
United Arab Emirates.
It's Doha.
Doha. Oh, so that's the United Arab Emirates then. Is that? No, that's Qatar.
No, that's Qatar.
Yeah. Sorry, the specific cities of the trucial states are unfamiliar.
Kling, I'm proud to say that you're so bad at geography. I hereby pronounce you an honorary American.
Oh, that's good. I was just going to say that.
Thanks.
You know what you do if you have no idea what you're saying? You just say the GCC, and then everybody knows what you're talking about.
Huh?
What? Yeah, that went completely over my head.
The GCC.
Okay, if people don't know what you're referring to, which city, they always say the GCC, which is the Gulf.
I'm sorry that I didn't know the capital of Qatar, because my studies really revolve around the capital of Qatar and the capital of the Gulf states.
Don't you follow racing?
And for not knowing the capital of one of the Gulf states, I am officially American.
Yes.
Thank you for awarding me this. Grandmaster Poobah, Atheismo. Yes.
So let's get into how did it wind down? Who was the last European warrior or ruler to hold on to the territory in Jerusalem? I understand that there are knights in Malta that held out even longer, but that's we won't worry too much about that. Who kicked them out of Jerusalem once and for all? Was it earlier than Baybar?
Yeah. Really, it was around the time kicked out. I suppose. Really, it was Saladin. I mean, they did lease it back for a little while, but really, they didn't ever take it back in an armed battle.
Okay, well, let me addend this again. What I'm really interested about is the climate in Jerusalem during this leasing period. I guess before we finish it off once and for all, I'd like to know more about that. I mean, now like at that point, what was the approximate breakdown of European settlers and Christians versus natives of Muslim, Jewish, and Eastern Christian breakdown.
Well, at that point, you got the Latin state of Antioch was the major Latin state now that Jerusalem had gone, and it was that area. I mean, they were quite settled by then. You're getting to your second or your third generation in some cases in that particular area, which of course is right next to. Let's explain this for Klingschor. It's right just up the coast from Jerusalem.
Thank you. I do not know that.
He's an Orientalist, not a geographist.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
I actually tuned out because I was looking up something that I'm going to bring up in a second. What are we talking about?
It's okay. It was just a bit of general abuse aimed your way. I wouldn't worry about it.
Fantastic. You know me. I'm a masochist. You know, like
Enjoy. Now, so there was that presence there, and it was sort of
So which city?
Antioch.
Oh, never mind.
I know where Antioch is.
Okay, fine. Let's move on.
Let's move
Anyway,
on.
by all means, continue.
Just a few minutes late.
Yeah, they were becoming part of the scenery almost in that region. Deals were being done. Treaties sometimes to fight other people were done between the whoever at the time had Jerusalem, and it was sort of settled, but not. Obviously, there was still a little bit of friction. But this bloke in a white skirt back in Rome still wanted Jerusalem. The problem is the person that got it was Frederick IV. But he was a guy, he spoke Arabic. There's rumours he was actually an atheist because some of his writings suggest he didn't believe in any particular higher power. He went there and he said... He struck a deal. He found out that Antioch were talking to these people, and he said, "Well, to be honest, would it be cheaper if I could just do some kind of deal? Can I have it for 10 years?" And because Jerusalem really didn't matter, they thought, "Yeah, well, why not?" At the end of the 10 years, they then kept hold of it. They then said, "No, you've got to go now." Oh, shit. Smashing my microphone there, sorry. They had to leave because of other political pressures, because things were getting heated between Antioch and this power, because these deals weren't happening the same way, and you're running up to the point where Mongols are driving people in and the population's growing, and there's this new group there, and so there's more battles. I mean, the real final blow in Jerusalem to the Westerners was when they were finally driven out once and for all by the I just said them earlier. It begins with K. Khazarian. What was that? Turks. Khwarezmian, thank you. Who were leased, basically. I'm gonna get you the details so you can hear it from the actual guys.
Anyway, it just seems like a fascinating, because this going back to that movie. What made it interesting was seeing how the some of the Europeans were sort of going native. The women putting the henna tattoos, people learning the languages, and the cultures kind of merging, and then this what must have been an incredible state of uneasiness, having a major metropolitan center garrisoned by foreigners, and then you have colonists coming in, and then finally the walls are raised. Now everything's even more uncertain. I wonder, is it during this leasing period? Is it garrisoned by Western troops?
Yeah, I mean, it's
fully administered by the one of the Crusaders.
Yeah, it's run by. Hang on, I'm trying to find who ran it. I'm trying to find all these details. Do you know when you write down loads of notes and then you've got so many notes you don't know where your notes are because you've got pages of them? I've done that, but yeah, it was. Blah, 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 blah. Where are we? It led to them being thrown out. If you're interested in the end, it led to them being thrown out, and it was on. Here we go. August. Where are you? August the 23rd, 1244. The Khwarezmians. I apologise again.
It's fine.
Threw them out once and for all, and got them out of Jerusalem, and they never really reclaimed it. But here's an interesting thing, just to show you a little bit of the lay of the land at that time. Even though they'd said, listen, your 10 years are up, and ended up throwing them out, using this mercenary force, basically. The same year, October the 17th, I've written here, Outrima forces, so in other words, the Levant Latin Christians, allied with Muslims from Damascus and Homs, annihilated La Fourbière near Gaza. So that is some Westerners going with their neighbour Muslims to attack some other Westerners.
That's what I was referring to, but when I said before that they allied with Muslim forces.
So wait, now is this just a classic case of strange bedfellows, or had the Crusaders been in the Near East for so long that there was more interconnectivity between the Muslim surrounding states and the Crusader states?
I think in many cases they had more in common with their surrounding states than they did with the Crusader states.
Actually, yeah. I mean, the Crusaders, the new fresh Crusaders, people who were fresh off the boat, actually, I think, were a bit hostile towards the Crusaders who've been living there because there was. I mean, this is something I want to bring up. What I was just looking at because I was just looking at Jonathan Phillips, the Latin East 1098 to 1291, which is in Riley Smith's The Oxford History of the Crusades. This was last year. I found this, and then I found it interesting, so I made a note of it. Is that when the Crusaders came first, initially there were massacres, but then after a few years, like there weren't that many Crusaders, right? And so they had to integrate. They had to rely on the local population, and there was actually a lot of integration, a lot of like what you said about the movie, women with the henna and stuff. This kind of did happen. And the Muslims and all the different Christian heretical sects were allowed to live in the Crusader polities or around the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and there was, you know, a degree of tolerance and coexistence in some periods or for a while. Right,
because I mean the image I have in my mind, you know, sort of growing up with this is that such was the divide between the two cultures that the Crusaders were all considered themselves like the U.S. cavalry fighting the Indians, and that they would stay in their forts, not go out. That they were, you know, these outposts and bastions against a sort of pure lack of civilization. But it seems like it's just a bit more. You know, there was obviously a lot more. There was a lot more talking, trading, and interacting, and probably the conquered populace. I mean, it's a lot like when the Arabs conquered the Persians, and then they soaked up Persian culture like a sponge. I think that it's probably a similar thing when you've got a city and 9/10 of them are from a local culture. It seems like sooner or later people are going to start going native.
Listen to this, right? This is a quote, right? This is on page 115 of what I just cited. The pattern of Frankish settlement was determined by the Westerners' lack of manpower. But while large numbers of settlers lived in urban areas, the traditional stereotype of most of the Franks living safely in their castles or cities is not entirely accurate. It now appears that a significant percentage of them occupied villages and manor houses, new towns, and there's a French word that I can't pronounce, in which free Western peasants could be given land by a local lord in return for 10% and blah, blah, blah. So there was actually like rural settlement as well, and there was like some degree of integration.
Yeah.
So, as always, the truth is more complicated than the simple propaganda that religious parties of many different bents put out there for various political reasons.
So, at the end of the day, all of these kingdoms gone, obviously not there anymore. Byzantines lose Cyprus. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, the point is, as far as like the mainland Europe and Asia, didn't the borders mostly reset with the exception of Spain being permanently reconquered?
No, because now the Turks were expanding into Anatolia.
Wait, I thought they'd already pushed. I thought at the very beginning of the First Crusade they'd already pushed.
So they had mostly kicked them out of Anatolia. That's right, and then they reclaimed some, or it went back and forth. But the general trend was that the Turks pushed the Byzantine or the Romans out of Anatolia, and then they went into the Balkans, and they basically consumed Constantinople, and then up into the Balkans and all the way to the gates of Vienna. So the trend was for the the Islamic Commonwealth to expand at the expense of Christendom, despite the Crusades.
So
it was complicated. It wasn't simply one gaining, because it also at the same time, I mean, you had the Spanish conquering Al-Andalus and then beginning to conquer North African cities and subduing North African cities. But then the Ottomans came in and kicked the Spanish out of the North African cities. And
how far along the Maghreb coast did the Spanish get, the European Spanish?
There wasn't like a blanket. It was like they were conquering and attacking specific cities along the coast.
Oh, okay. Naval. Okay, gotcha.
They did occupy a couple, but I think it was mostly around Morocco.
Okay.
But they were all, as far as Tunisia, I think like they were going down, and the Italian city-states were doing similar things.
But yeah, if you don't count the later push by the Ottomans. Seems like the border's mostly reset.
No, I don't think so, because it was like, I mean, sure, the border's reset in the Levant, but everywhere else it was in flux. Like it was kind of like this, because the Ottomans came up into Europe and the Spanish were going down into the Iberian Peninsula and North Africa. So I don't know. And then the Ottomans came back in, and then the Barbary pirates. And,
right, but not counting the Western Front, because again we're talking about more the stereotypical crusade, the front that people talk, the venture, the push for the holy sites.
Yeah.
On that front, the
yes, they reset. Yeah.
The Turks and Byzantines would keep in a slap fight over the Bosporus for a while, but other than that, it seems like it just was all for nothing.
Well, reset if you say that
more or less where they were when it all began. Muslims.
Well, but see, it was completely different political entities in control. So but reset from the basic kind of Christendom, Islamdom, sure.
There were changes in management, but ultimately, in terms of how if you were to accept it as Latin Christendom and to a lesser extent Orthodox Christendom against the Ummah and the East.
Yeah, the Islamic Commonwealth.
Yeah, it seemed like it came full circle.
Yeah, well, I guess you could say that the Crusades were... If the purpose of the Crusades were to reclaim the Holy Land and to defend the Romans, then the Crusades were a complete failure. Because the Romans fell to the Turks and the Holy Land was not regained for in the long run.
But did they ever find the WMD?
No. No, they did not.
Well, no, I mean, so they never got the cross section back? No. Nothing?
No, but they did. Have we covered that?
Yeah, we did.
They
never... What a waste.
They did get the Holy Lands of Antioch, so they had that. But,
Okay, well...
I think that covers the Crusades, really. I mean, that covers the Levantine Crusades. We have to Al-Andalus, which I think is a topic that can be done just by itself, because it's just so much fun to get into that.
Hopefully better than how we covered this one. Okay, everyone.
I'd like essential points.
If we have, I'll give some opportunities. We'll go around for final comments. I'd like to thank everyone, Klingschor, Stop, Ali, and a special thanks to our special guest, Mr. Godbehere here. Thank you for everyone who came to watch us live, and to everyone who watches us on YouTube. We'll see you in another 2 weeks, another topic. Any final comments? We'll go from left to right, starting with Klingschor.
Well, first and foremost, you can find us on YouTube if you're watching the vlog.
Foremost.
Yes, I'm borrowing a positive rhetorical device from Hamza Sources. So you can there's a link in the bar above, the Gin and Tonic Show bar, and you can click on it and find us on YouTube and Facebook. You can also find us on Twitter and on iTunes, but all of these things are linked on our YouTube channel. So yeah, and I think that we covered most of what I wanted to talk about with the Crusades. So yeah, that was the Crusades. They were more complicated than people make out. Beware of political and religious ideologues and what they say about such things.
Stop spamming.
Oh, I thought you said left to right. Surprise!
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Your arrangement might be different from mine. I beg your pardon.
Okay, no problem. I am so flexible. what I want to say, Richard, thank you very, very much. And thank you very much for fitting in with this highly unstructured show, and that you made yourself available and answered all these questions. Like it seemed more like a grilling at times, and I thought it was fascinating. Thank you very much.
And you can find Richard's YouTube channel linked right now above in the little bar thing, or it'll also be linked in the video description when we upload this to YouTube.
Ali.
Hopefully I can be useful at some point in the future. I'm sorry we're not contributing anything, but I think you guys
the thing about Jihad
did quite a fine job.
It's the usual struggle to get a word in with me here.
No. Seriously, it was a great show. I enjoyed learning a lot of things that I will probably forget as soon as the show's over, but it was fascinating nonetheless. So
I never learned anything here because I know everything. Richard, final comment before we go.
Oh, actually, can I plug Aziz as well before I go, because I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I'm hearing rumors that he may have already received a year in prison for blasphemy. I'm not sure. The website, the official Kuwaiti website, still says that he is still scheduled for trial on the 28th, and I don't know how accurate there is. But for anybody who doesn't know, Aziz is a guy. He's an ex-Muslim. He's an atheist living in Kuwait. Works with me on a different panel show in Arabic called Arab Atheist Broadcasting, and he was picked up in Kuwait on charges of blasphemy sometime last month, and actually I think towards the beginning of the year. And basically what we're trying to do is make noise, get we've got some petitions that people can sign. We've got some other ways, like calling your congressman, things like that people can do to try to help him out. So what I will do now is I will post the link to the Facebook page with all the information and the petition and all that good stuff in the chat. So please go sign the petition, share the page, like it, share it with all people. And I appreciate anybody who does that, and I'm sure he does as well. So that's my plug-in. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so Richard, thank you very much for coming here. We really appreciated your input.
Wait, we didn't give him the last word yet.
What? Well, this is it.
Because Ellie jumped in, so
yeah, this is it.
This is it.
This is it.
This is it. Okay.
This is it.
Well, thank you for having me, everybody. To be honest, as a historian, I've got to say you may think it was chaotic, but that's kind of normal for the par for his discussion about history. For me, it's usually more like a mud wrestle than a structured discussion. So that was fine. It was fantastic. Couple of things. Firstly, I go sign that petition, certainly. The next thing is I was just going to mention, if anybody out there is in London on the 28th, there's a bit of a debate you guys might be interested in around near London. It's at Goldsmiths College, and the debate is, can we live better lives without religion? On the humanist, Yes, We Can side is Caspar Melville, editor of New Humanist magazine, and Dr. Stephen Law, who's a fine philosophy. And on the opposite side is, drum roll please, Hamza Sadist.
Oh, boy.
And Haroon Qureshi.
Wait, what?
What?
And Haroon Qureshi.
No, the Hamza guy.
Hamza and Haroon.
First and foremost, the Quran invented the iPod. Yeah, great.
Yes.
It'll be a bloody...
If you're in London, go there and root for our old friend Hamza.
Show him support.
And by root for, we mean ridicule and laugh at.
What's particularly hilarious
And
about
by
this?
ridicule and laugh at, we mean throw rotten tomatoes at.
Well,
Yeah, if that's not illegal.
can I just say, what you should do is stay absolutely silent, because he's up against Stephen Law. Stephen Law's the guy who wiped the floor with William Lane Craig last year. Just
I'm actually excited.
Stephen Law, a brilliant man. I have all his books on my reading queue. If you have time, which I don't right now, you should definitely read them. The guy is a brilliant man.
What is his last name? How's it spelled?
Stephen Law, L-A-W, and the most
Those
recent book, which is a great
Lol.
or believing bullshit. It's fantastic.
I'm going to go there. I'm going to go to that debate. I'm going to throw my shoe at Stephen Law.
Yeah, and watch the William Lane Craig debate as well, because that will give you quite a good idea of who this guy is. I think he was brilliant. I actually have a playlist of people debating William Lane Craig, and I think that by far he does the best job.
Yeah.
So yeah. Great. What's that?
I was going to say what law does in a nutshell is uses all of William Lane Craig's arguments to prove that God is evil. It's fantastic. It's amazing.
Okay, well, thank you again.
Thank you very much, guys.
My final word in the name of, in the words of the counselor from South Park, the Crusades were bad, okay? That's basically all you got to take away from it. I mean, even if a bunch of pissed off Catholics refuse to concede the point, they didn't really resolve that much.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you do want to go to my channel, please do. I'm going to be over the next few weeks doing a slightly more linear story of the Crusades while bashing a few Catholic opinions at the same time. So enjoy.
Can I just say that I'm really saddened by the fact that we didn't mention the Pope quitting at this time?
It's like a fart in a fan factory, mate. Like, gone in an instant. Like, who even cares anymore? I suppose I should
a few laughs about
Pope wants to stay in the Catholic Church.
He's hung up his ruby spurs.
Yes. I thought I'd quickly mention, for those people
by
who
ruby spurs, underage boys.
Yes.
Just so that way I know what we're talking about. No.
Yes. Now we've got to wind up because we've been along long enough. I forgot to mention. Sorry. I can't. For those of you who are my subscribers, my channel's actually been flagged a second time, so I actually can't access my channel. I can't respond to comments because my video response to Dollar Films was false flagged. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Okay.
Are you how does that work? Okay, let's do this just now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Salam. Take care. Goodbye.
Yeah.